Good afternoon, everybody. I call to order the February 24th meeting of the Finance and Operations Committee of the University of Minnesota Board of Regents. Thank you to those of you who are attending us live via stream video, or those of you who are in attendance in our boardroom or via Zoom. I want to welcome our student representatives for today. I think Leo Cohen will be joining us and is on Zoom. Okay, hello, Leo. That's from the Rochester campus, and Hal Johnson we have here from the Morris campus. Welcome in. Yeah. Let me welcome also Chair Hips, who I'm doing a poor substitution for probably this afternoon, but he's joining us via Zoom as well. I'll note that Senior Vice President Franz is engaged on university business elsewhere and will join us later in the meeting. Until then, Vice President Tonneson will serve as our senior leader liaison. So our first item this afternoon is to discuss the fiscal year 25 annual operating budget framework, and Vice President Tonneson will take us through this. I will turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. I'm excited to move to this chair so I could advance the slides. So hopefully that's okay. Plus this feels familiar. So today, in this discussion this afternoon, we're going to build on the conversation that we had in December when we talked about the basic trend information on revenues and expenditures. The presentation today will be a bit more focused on information that's necessary to develop the budget framework, information that we can use to actually make decisions about developing that FY25 budget. For this budget cycle this year, we did have a general budget model overview session last September, so I won't repeat all of those details today. But as we walk through these slides and then during the conversation, if you have questions about the budget process or the budget model, we are happy to answer those, of course. And of course, despite what I just said, I am going to start with a little bit of a repeat here, but just very briefly. I wanted to give you the context for where we are sitting within the 2-year biennial cycle. We are actually in the pink section on this slide. You will remember that the whole process starts in the summer of every even-numbered year when we build our biennial budget request to the state. We start by creating a high-level planning framework, and that's represented by the black box here, that sets out our plans for each of the major budget variables in the state and tuition-funded portion of the budget. Those assumptions and plans take us through the odd-numbered year legislative session, which we refer to as the budget year at the Capitol, and simultaneously they take us through the annual budget process that this time resulted in the FY24 approved budget last June, once we knew what our appropriation was going to be. That initial black box set of planning framework assumptions had to be adjusted prior to the start of the FY25 budget cycle on the bottom arrow here to incorporate what we now know about the FY25 state appropriation. And I'll talk more about that in some upcoming slides. But we entered the fall support unit part of the budget process with the understanding that we would need to deliver a recommended budget based on current law, and then a second set of options should we get any of the supplemental budget requests that you approved in October. Now, in the pink portion of this cycle, we have delivered budget instructions to our academic units, and we'll start meeting with them later this month. Sorry, I forgot to advance these, to learn about their needs, challenges, and opportunities. Then we will put together the President's recommended all funds budget for your review in May. We will base our recommendations on the robust review we do with all of our units and the decisions that we make on the variables that we are actually discussing today. To set the stage for the variables discussion, I want to visually remind everyone what I mean when I talk about the budget framework. At its most basic level, it is simply an equation identifying planned or expected increases in resources that must be equal to or greater than planned or expected increases in costs. It's a form of incremental budgeting at a very high level, which proceeds from the expectation that the base budget is balanced, so we can focus our time and effort on making sure the incremental changes in that budget remain balanced. The decisions we bring here are focused on the O&M and state appropriation and tuition funds because that's where leadership decisions have the most impact. We do not ignore the roughly other 60% of the revenues and the corresponding expenditures when we build the budget. Those revenues are an extremely important part of the overall plan, but the decisions to be made by leadership simply don't fall there in this part of the process. To make this framework part of the budget relevant in real terms, I share with you two quick views. These are actual examples of the approved FY24 budget in a framework format. First on this slide, the state O&M and tuition-focused budget framework that you approved as part of the budget for this year. You can see the incremental changes in resources planned, and you can see the planned incremental new spending. You can also see that the decisions that we made to get to these summarized totals not only maintained a balanced budget, but were designed to actually result in an $8.9 million addition to our structurally positive recurring balance. Because it's available and it's uncommitted to any recurring costs this year, this roughly $9 million is a down payment for what we know will be significant cost increases in FY25. And we'll talk more about that on an upcoming slide. For the second view of this year's budget from attachment 1 to the approved budget, the display of all revenues, state appropriation and tuition, plus those revenues beyond the planning framework. These are not the incremental changes like they were on the previous page for the year, but instead represent the new totals for all funds after the incremental changes have been incorporated. For the primary framework funds highlighted in yellow here, the results flow from estimated enrollments, from decisions made by the state on our appropriations, and by this board regarding tuition rates. And that's close to 40% of our projected revenues for the year. For the other funds, the results flow from decisions made by this board related to fees, plus our annual high-level estimates of changes in the other revenues based on trends and projections that we build from conversations with units generating the revenues. So for example, it includes projected trend growth in gifts and growth in endowment income based on returns in recent years, and growth in auxiliary revenues based on the approved housing and dining rates coupled with estimated occupancy, and so on and so on. What I'm hoping is evident is that the budget framework and the way we look at it is one helpful component in getting to this level of detail and in displaying the budget in a meaningful format. Talking through the incremental changes to apply to the base for the state and tuition funds, and then to arrive at the new full projected revenue and expenditure base like you see here, that requires the conversations we are having today. And that means focusing in on some specific questions related to our immediate plans. You've seen this before, and you will likely see it again because building the framework is an iterative process of asking and answering questions about what to plan for the incremental changes for each major resource and each major expenditure category. The types of questions that are outlined here. For FY25, we know our state appropriation will not be increasing under current law. So this time around, we need to ask ourselves, how should we plan for a potential approval of some or all of our supplemental requests for $45 million? If we get additional funds, how should we apply them? We need to ask what our goals are for tuition rate changes and internal reallocations under different state appropriation scenarios. What's possible in terms of growth in other revenues to support core operations, or where are there challenges in that arena that we might need to address with the framework funds? What are the goals for salary increases and addressing strategic initiatives, and so on? We started the conversations on these questions last month, but the first or second time through and answering them generally leaves us with an imbalanced budget because we want to do it all, right? So we have to go back and make adjustments until the final plans balance the budget in a way that addresses the university's goals in the best way possible. Given that task before us, today we want to share the next iteration of information that might help in building the estimates necessary to pull it all together. And we'll start on the expenditure side. And that starts with the core. So for budget planning, we often think of our expenditures in two groups. These must-dos to keep our current operations in a strong position, and then strategic investments in programs and services. In this core category that you see here, the primary spending obligations center around these three items. For FY25, compensation and providing a meaningful pay increase to our employees will remain our most significant spending category. We must remember that whatever plans we implement for pay increases impacts all of our funds. So while here we talk about how to cover these costs through internal budget cutting, through tuition or state appropriation increases, we also have to ask all the other revenue generating activities to cover whatever the cost will be through increased revenues where possible or budget cuts. Our fringe costs for FY25 without a salary increase will actually decrease an estimated $15 million spread across all funds. Benefit costs are increasing, so don't let me leave you with the impression benefits are going down, but as a part of the required fringe rate methodology, an over-recovery in past years coupled with a higher salary base results in an overall reduction in the fringe benefit rates compared to last year, which in turn leads to a reduction in costs for our departments. We can talk more about that if you have questions following the presentation. Then, however, from that savings in the fringe costs for our departments, we have two cost components to consider. The labor agreements that were settled for a 4% salary increase, we know that will cost us $9.7 million, and each 1% increase in the salary pool for all other employees will add roughly another $26 million in costs. And that's across all funds, both the state and tuition portion and all of the other funds. For facilities and technology infrastructure, it looks like our required inflationary increases on the facility side is actually a mixed situation, a general inflationary increase for utilities at roughly 3%, but again, a rather high 10% increase in debt service costs. For the technology infrastructure, the annual licensing and maintenance cost increase of over $2 million is in the normal range, but that range is continuing to inch upward every year. None of this cost includes investment to enhance services or address major compliance or safety issues. It just reflects the regular kind of keep the lights on and the engines running kind of cost increases. Additions beyond that would fall in the category for strategic investments that's represented on the next slide. And finally, for general inflation on things we buy, if the cost increases are minimal, units will manage them within the normal ups and downs within their budget, using balances and reserves or relying on regular budget savings from turnover or perhaps buying less or differently than they otherwise would have. If the projected cost increases in this area are significant for some units, they again become part of our discussions on strategic investment, which is on the focus of this slide. An important budget variable for any university is what it plans for advancing the work of the institution to the next level in terms of quality, impact, and service. If we could plan for an actual investment pool beyond the core costs of the previous page of $20 to $30 million, we would be able to address the high priority items in this bucket. And I mean 20 to 30 million recurring, not one-time funds. In years of more limited resource gains or when the required core cost increases are significantly high, it's only the most critical needs and opportunities that can be accommodated in the budget. The combined impact of all the other variables directly impacts the level of new spending in this category. For example, if a large investment in salary increases is a priority, or if we must dedicate more resources to keeping the lights and the heat on, then this investment pool for other programmatic and service initiatives will necessarily be smaller given the available resources, which is a good transition to the resource side of the framework, focused on these three buckets: the state appropriation, tuition, revenue, and internal budget cuts to reallocate existing dollars. As this slide shows, the state appropriation for the last 4 biennia has grown, but intermittently. The state has clearly set a pattern. Any gains have been realized in year 1 of the biennium with little to no growth in the second year. The state's been choosing to control the impact of their decisions on the starting point for the next biennium. They choose to control the tails, they call it, because any incremental increase in year 2 has to count twice in the tails for the next biennium, as the way they look at their budget. That pattern is the reason we decided to hold some amount of our resource increase in year 1, in this case it's FY24, as uncommitted until year 2, FY25. That's the $8.9 million that I mentioned earlier. As a quick reminder, we received in total a $51.5 million increase in our recurring O&M appropriation for FY24 and no additional increase in FY25. This was spread across 4 items. The 51.5 was spread across 4 items. The most significant being a recurring $50 million increase for core mission support. This actually went a long way toward meeting our $45 million request for that item, plus a portion of the subsequent request for $24 million to address our FY23 tuition revenue shortfall compared to budget. So $50 million toward that $69 million of need. We also received a recurring $1 million for safety and security investments in response to our $5 million request, and 2 smaller items that we did not ask for but do appreciate as priorities of the state. I also want to mention that an additional $4 million was technically appropriated to the Office of Higher Education for transfer to the university as part of the American Indian Scholars Program. Starting this year, it is paying the tuition and fees for eligible American Indian students on all of our campuses. It's not part of our base funding, which is why it isn't included in this table, but it is an important new form of student support. In addition, we received $16 million in one-time funding in FY24 for 4 different items and $6 million in one-time funding for 2 items in FY25. These funds are not part of the base appropriation, and they are dedicated in appropriation law to very specific things, so they're not available to address new FY25 costs, and they are not on this chart. The takeaway here for today's discussion is that under current law, there are no new state dollars for the budget framework for FY25. We've requested the $45 million increment, so we need to develop plans for what we will do in the framework if we get those funds. Over the last 10 years, on the tuition side, the university has had very modest goals related to changes in the rates, recognizing the concerns of students and families related to the price of attaining a post-baccalaureate degree. For resident undergraduate tuition rates, we've worked to hold the rate increases at or below the rates of inflation. This is particularly relevant, I think, for Crookston, Duluth, Morris, and Rochester campuses as they face a very competitive recruitment environment. In most cases, we've implemented rate increases for them less than that on the Twin Cities campus in order to widen the differential between the locations. Our strategy for the Twin Cities non-resident non-reciprocity rate has differed from that of the resident rate. Prior to the pandemic, we increased this rate significantly for incoming freshmen while holding the rate increases for continuing students to no more than 5.5% each year. This strategy moved the rate to the middle of the Big Ten. We were 8 of 14 just before the pandemic. And while not all schools followed that same path, we have moved only slightly over the last several years to being the 9th highest rate out of 14 in that comparison group. Since the pandemic, we have chosen to increase the non-resident rate the same amount as the resident rate. Finally, the goal for graduate and professional rates has generally been to hold increases to around the rate of inflation, with variations by school driven by market considerations, student debt load, program rankings, and so forth. Added all together, assuming stable enrollment, a 1% increase across all rates is estimated to generate $9.6 million for next year. The question we face is, what should we plan for each of these rate categories for FY25 given current law, and then with the potential of up to $45 million in new state money. Finally, on the resource side, we need to decide how much reallocation is necessary and appropriate for the FY25 budget. Reallocation is our internal practice of finding efficiencies or purposely reducing or eliminating expenditures on a recurring basis in order to reinvest existing resources in new things or new costs. In some years, we are in the position of implementing exceptionally large expense reductions for 2 purposes. In part, to offset a loss of revenue, such as a reduction in state appropriation or a reduction in tuition revenue, and in part as a reallocation to cover cost increases or higher priority investments, which don't go away when the revenues drop. This practice happens at all universities, but not all of them incorporate it into their central budget process. They expect units to take these actions, but centrally they don't necessarily approve them and may not hear about or in any way track the results and the impact of those cuts. Here at the University of Minnesota, for many years, we have directed the level of required reallocations. We have made decisions knowing the expected impact of these actions, and we have asked units to report on actual implementation of their communicated plans. In 9 of the last 10 years, we implemented planned reallocations of 1 to 2% of total unit state and tuition allocations on a recurring basis. In FY22, our average reallocation across all units was particularly high at 2.5% due to the uncertainties of the pandemic. The recurring reallocations have not been implemented across the board. Decisions have differed by unit based on their needs and opportunities and their unique financial situations. The goal here continues to be to find or create opportunities to gain efficiencies and lower costs, or at least slow them down, and to do so while maintaining quality. But at some point and in some areas, the ability to achieve that goal isn't possible today or won't be in the near future, and we need to face some difficult decisions leading to programmatic and scope changes to eliminate or reduce activities, pull the associated expenses out, and try to maintain or improve quality in all that remains. Moving forward, we have to choose how deep to push the budget reductions for FY25 because I believe they will be necessary. Each 1% reallocation target on the traditional base of state and tuition funds reduces existing costs by roughly $20 million. So, to pull it all together, we want to show you 2 things. The primary variables we need to make decisions about all on one slide, so everything I just talked about in one place, and some example or hypothetical budget frameworks to demonstrate how those decisions can lead to a plan. So first, the variables. These are the primary budget variables to consider for next year, the resources on the left and the costs on the right. Again, this is focused on the framework funds of state appropriation and tuition. Some of the math in this table is pretty simple, but we wanted to give you some basic building blocks for questions or scenario playing if you so choose. There's very little that we know or that is definite at this point. On the resource side, we do know the state appropriation increase is $0 in current law, but we need to wait to learn if we will get an appropriation increase and how much that will be. We need to decide what to plan for our tuition revenues and our internal reallocations. On the cost side, we know that with only the 4% salary increase in our labor agreements, we will face a slight reduction in our compensation costs of $2.5 million thanks to that reduction in fringe. And the minimum cost increases for facilities and technology, totaling roughly $10 million in the minimum column in the lower right quadrant of the chart, those are known. The other numbers on this slide are estimates attached to different assumptions. For example, in the gold box, the cost of a 2% salary pool for non-labor represented employees would be $22.9 million. That's the $2.5 million reduction plus 2 times the $12.7 million for each 1%. Now, for the hypothetical example scenarios, on this slide, we've displayed 2 different example frameworks using information from the previous slide. Please note that what we actually end up with will not be either of these exactly as you see them, or probably any variation that we could talk about today. These are meant to show you that making decisions for variables on one row has a direct impact on the other rows. You can see that in both examples, there are certain cost items that remain the same. Lines 16, 19, and 20 remain the same. Those are known. But you can also see that the ability to provide a salary increase outside of the signed labor agreements and to provide programmatic and service investments can change considerably depending on the resource decisions above. As one scenario, starting with example 1 and eliminating any new appropriation for core support as you move to example 2 could mean a variety of offsetting decisions on other variables. In this hypothetical case, in example 2, it meant an increase in the tuition rate changes, lines 1 through 3, and a drop in the compensation assumption and spending on program and service improvements on lines 17, 18, and 21. Or another way to look at this could be starting with example 2 as one way of balancing the budget given the current law appropriation. And then when you move to the left, under a scenario of receiving a sizable portion, just a made-up portion of our requested supplemental 45 million, in this case, assuming we got 35 million. It shows one way of using that new state money, dropping tuition rate increases down to the lower end of what we had been planning, increasing the compensation change from 2.75%, which is low, to a 4% level, closer to what we were planning, and increasing the investment pool for programmatic and service enhancements. There are many combinations that we could model, and we are doing that right now. The picture at this 30,000-foot level is a guide that can provide a starting point for that planning process. As I mentioned earlier, we are halfway through our task of meeting with all the units across the university to determine what their challenges and opportunities are. And we will learn a lot through that process that allows us to continually refine these variables until we get down to the version that the president wants to recommend to you for approval. It's this whole process of learning about the appropriation and gaining an understanding of the unit level budgets, combined with the goals of the institution, that help us make decisions on the variables and arrive at a final balanced version of the budget. Your thoughts and input throughout the process, including today, is part of that tweak and repeat cycle. It helps us to shape the answers to these variable questions. So if you have thoughts today about any of the variables, assuming no new state money, and then the priorities for how we might want to spend any additional appropriations, we would be happy to engage in that conversation with you, and we thank you for your attention today.
Thank you so much, Vice President Tonneson, and I'll open it up for questions or comments.
Done? Oh, Doug's.
Regent Hips.
Hi, sorry I'm not here. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Wake up, everyone.
Sorry I'm not there in person. Got a stomach bug, so. So when I look at this budget, Vice President Tonneson, you know, I look at the tuition line, and you know, it's really unpopular to raise tuition. We all know that. So we're only going to raise tuition by either getting more from out-of-state students, or more from more students, or to fill our campuses. So that's really, that bucket is really hard to get more money out of. And then research is kind of dollar in, dollar out, so we can't really count on that. So really the last two are going to be philanthropy and government relations. And it feels like as we move through here, we're cutting the things that give us good relationships with legislators, and we're cutting programs with alumni that's going to get us money in philanthropy. And I think that we need to really beef up that area of the budget so that we can be in a poised position to get this money as it's turning over the next 20 years or so. You know, I don't know where, you know, I was looking at some different endowments like Texas and different schools our size. I mean, they've got 10 times more in their endowment than we have. You know, that's a huge amount of money, and we have to really work on getting that money up. So what are your thoughts there?
Thank you, Vice Chair Wheeler. Regent Hips, yes. That's my thought. Yes, we do need to work on that. That will only help us. That's my opinion. It will only help us with our budget. I do want to caution, however, that we can't rely only on that, because it also, rightly so, the donors have expectations around the funding that they give us, and it is usually restricted to certain purposes. Now, if it can be used to generate chairs, faculty chairs, for example, that is a direct operating benefit to the unit, and it helps the operating budget. Others, a lot of scholarships obviously helps our students and brings more students in, and that helps, you know, on the revenue side. But to the extent that they restrict it in certain ways, it's not available to cover the kind of things that you see here, a general salary increase, for example, or utilities. So it's an important, absolutely critical portion of our projected plan that we need to rely more on that as a source of income. It just can't be the only one, in my opinion.
Well said. You know, and money is very fungible. So we can, you know, if we have donors giving money to something that's in our mission, that frees up money somewhere else in our mission that's used for other stuff. So, but yes, it's a puzzle that it's got to be very, very difficult for you to put that puzzle together when you have all these earmarked dollars. But I think that's going to be a bigger part of what we're going to do going forward. I mean, our approval rating in higher education is going down, and we have to get it back up, and that's only going to be through public relations. So, thank you.
Yeah, if I could, Vice Chair
Please.
Wheeler, I would also like to add, I agree that it can, quote, free things up. However, a lot of times, and this is actually the exciting part of it, it can really offer that edge of excellence because it helps to fund new things, right? A lot of times rather than relying on these base discretionary funds to launch new things, perhaps that's how we can use the additional philanthropy too in an exciting way. So it definitely will add. So leave it there.
Great. Thank you. Other comments or questions? Rishan Kanyanya.
Thank you very much. I'm still forming it as I raised my hand, so I thought we'd move on. But okay, that babbling was enough time. I think I got it now. Appreciate the presentation. I was just going to talk about reallocation, and I think you kind of alluded. You said, I mean, there can be a positive to making people have to really think and challenge them. But year after year after year, it gets tight. And that's kind of what you were getting at. Quality and offerings, and you talked about scope and depth programmatic, right? And I think broadly, so a lot of units, I bet in your meetings, a lot of deans and chancellors are saying we're kind of there, right? And this is what that's going to mean for us. So, partially a comment, just for us. The challenges are very real, and, okay, 0.5%, 0.75, compounding, you can eventually see the effects of that in the colleges, on the campuses, directly linking it to changes. And I think additionally, if the reallocation number was 0, you could at least put inflation there. There's a inbuilt reallocation actually. So this is actually on top of that. Obviously that applies for everyone at every level, at every unit, but they're already dealing with those pressures. So it's not really a question, just to really highlight that quality, excellence, the words we like to throw around, because we believe in them, this gets up against those eventually. And then on the other end, the new investments. You're right. You got to do new stuff, try new stuff, new programs, the next gen things we've been doing, the medical school, insane cloud, because we want to be moving forward. We don't want to be stagnant. If you're stagnant, you're moving backwards. Actually, we want to meet the new challenges of the state, the ones that are here and the ones that are on their way. And you can't do that without the new stuff. And I think you were right. And Regent Hipsch is always, very passionate about philanthropy and how we have to help advance that. Philanthropy doesn't fund HEPR. It funds new centers, new labs. So that's just wanted to highlight those challenges. They're very real. Yeah.
Thank you, Regent Kanyanya. Any other comments or questions?
Well,
Yeah, Regent Turner.
thank you, Chair Wheeler. Your comments bring up the question, I don't know, maybe it's obvious, why can't philanthropy fund, why can't drives be made to address some of our old buildings, like
If you write the check,
hall
we'll
and
take
things?
it.
No, but to do a content, to talk to them, and I'm just saying why does every cent of it have to be, why can't concrete campaigns be created to kind of free up some of ours to do some of the things that we need to do? Because now we're going, because we obviously can't count on the state. That's I'm depressed about them already, just having breakfast with them. But anyway. No, but the reality is, they're not counting on giving us any more money. And so my question is going to be focused around what can we do with the foundation and philanthropy if we tell the public, look, we've got these historical buildings that need to be renovated so people can use them, and this is a worthy cause too.
Yes, Vice Chair Wheeler, Regent Turner, we can always make the ask. Well, we work with the foundation closely on building the case statements for what do we need, where do we see the priorities, where do we want to go, and then they help us actually approach the community to fit in the ways that they want to into those plans, right? I think the history would show, and many of you around the table probably know this better than I, but the history would show that it's very difficult to raise gifts for some things. And we were kind of joking about it earlier, but to replace a boiler, for example, in a building, it's hard to raise money because, you know, no one wants to name the boiler room kind of thing, right? Historically, it's been very difficult to get funding for those kinds of projects. They are one time, and generally, so it doesn't help this operating side of the budget to search for dollars that way. But we can try.
Can I do a follow-up then?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so when you say boilers and all these other, and they want us to go climate friendly everywhere, et cetera. So what are we actively doing to get money out of the federal? I mean, because we're all into, you know, making electric cars everywhere and things like that. Well, and we're not the only, university system isn't the only one that needs to redo their HVAC.
No.
And so
Right.
shouldn't we, how actively do we, and maybe I asked this question before, and maybe somebody has answered it, but how actively are we going to the federal government?
Vice Chair Wheeler and Regent Turner, we are, and actually government relations is working to enhance our ability to work at the federal level to try to get more federal support. Clearly the grants, we're very active in grants, and that will continue, again, very specific purposes, but to be aware of all federal funding that's available. We are trying to improve our ability to do that, to make sure we take advantage of everything that we can at the federal level. It's not there isn't an easy bucket to point to, but.
Interim President Ettinger.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Wheeler and Regent Turner. I mean, in speaking with Melissa, I don't think she's in here right now, but she just went to Washington earlier this week, so she's starting that outreach work in terms of the rebuilding of our staff. We asked her to focus on the state side first because we have obviously 3 very important areas heading into this session, but that doesn't mean that the federal side is not also going to ultimately need to be a priority. And you're right in terms of identifying the right types of opportunities. There was all sorts of funding available for under the Inflation Reduction Act that goes toward green energy, so we should be looking at opportunities to potentially utilize that on our campuses.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. In responding to Regent Turner's question, I think this is also a question for either our regents who are on the foundation, because sit on the board of trustees, as to what the focus is. But at least my experience in the nonprofit world is getting people to donate for bricks and mortar is much harder than and equipment, that sort of thing, than it is for scholarship or that sort of thing. But I do think we need to look to the foundation, because I'm sure they have addressed and struggled with this issue as well, but it doesn't mean we can't ask again and see if there's a way to do a focus campaign that would address our backlog issues, the HEAPR issues. The larger question for me is if the legislature isn't interested in that, and that's not appealing to them, and this is an issue not only for us but for Melissa, are there things that would pull at their heartstrings? For example, faculty compensation, which we have a very robust report from the faculty, how they're talking about we're not competitive and we're losing people. Well, then maybe we go to the legislature and say, let's have $45 million to better compensate our faculty. And which our faculty don't, I'm sure they'd be very happy to go over there and ask for that. If the legislature isn't having their heartstrings pulled on tuition and they're not on bricks and mortar, then maybe we can approach them in a different way for the dollars we need, and that is through faculty compensation. And I don't know if that would work. That's where the experts come in, but somehow we have to tug at their heartstrings, and it doesn't seem to be. So far, we've done as good a job as we can, but we all know we need to do more.
Thank you. And Regent Davenport.
Thank you, Chair Wheeler. I don't have anything to figure this out. But first, I'll address the foundation. Regent Hips and Ruth Johnson and myself are on that. And we are, as a university, very blessed to have a foundation that looks to the priorities of the board and the regents in their pursuits of external funds. And so we've got great gratitude to them for helping us. That said, when we look at the piece that has to do with investment, we cannot not do that, as Regent Kenyanya said, and that's really where the foundation can be tremendously helpful. And the federal government, they're not interested in operational kind of things either, unfortunately, but they are heavy into student financial aid. And so that is tremendously helpful to our students there. I think any one of us would love to see zero tuition, 4+ compensation percent increase, the money to invest in new things. And I agree, Regent Kenyanya, if we stand in place, we're going backwards. So I think this just frames up for us the really difficult decision we have down the road. And I don't have an answer, so thank you.
Thank you.
We were waiting for an answer.
Yeah. Vice President Tonneson, any other comments that you wish to make?
No, not really, Vice Chair Wheeler. I say if you have thoughts and questions after this, just let us know, because this will be a multi-month process here of trying to develop our recommendation to you. So,
One last question or comment from Regent Gully.
Oh, thanks. Just a comment. I just wanted to, and thank you, Chair, and thank you. I just wanted to echo what my colleagues have already said about how important this discussion is, about how we, we've raised tuition so much, and we know that students are really struggling, and we know that we just had a long conversation about faculty on campus. We know we're struggling with retention. We also know that we have over time increased the number and amount of term faculty and adjuncts that we're using on campus. And I want to agree and echo what Regent Maron said and say that, our students' learning conditions are also our faculty working conditions. And so both of those things, we can't sort of pit one against the other, but it is really important that we figure out how to tell this story of how the budget cuts that we're dealing with. I mean, our people, I think, are doing absolutely the best that they can and are working to spread every resource as far as it can go. And so it's not anyone's fault that we're stretched, and it's our job to tell the story of why this matters and how it's shortchanging the people who need this work and shortchanging our state when we're not getting the resources that we need to support our students and our faculty and our staff. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Regent Gully. Thank you, Vice President Tonneson, very much for this. All right, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is to discuss the university's employment structure. And here to provide an overview of the current structure and its evolution over time is Vice President Ken Horstman and Assistant Vice President Lincoln Carlson. Vice President Horstman, are you okay to start us off?
Yes, Vice Chair Wheeler, thank you, and members of the board. We thank you for the opportunity to present today. We hope we will have plenty of time for a discussion as we conclude, and that will get started. As a follow-up to our presentation to you in October of last year on university job structures of the past, present, and going forward, we'd like to build on that discussion and provide the committee with a summary of the university's employment structure and how it has changed over recent times. Today, we will share data describing each of the employee groups, changes in headcount, shifts in employee composition, as well as factors that have influenced those changes, and finally, the challenges and opportunities to attract and retain faculty, staff, and student workers to advance the mission of the university. The slide you have before you is a snapshot of time of employees who earned pay during pay period 9, which is in late October of 2023. This specific pay period each year serves as the basis for reporting for many federal, state, and contractual requirements. And because it's the same period, it is a snapshot in time we can compare year over year. As with all employers, our headcount does change pretty much every pay period and varies throughout the year. The total employees represented here does not include temporary or casual employees or undergraduate student workers. And please note that the salary and fringe that are included today to provide context for this presentation and will be shared along with the compensation data when OHR provides its annual report to the board in May. Employee salaries and benefits represent our greatest expenditure, but the critical investment to recruit and retain our quality workforce in support of the U's mission, and I probably should go back one for this, historically for a number of years had been around the 63% level. For fiscal year 23, it is at 68.8%. And I think that is the impact of a number of floors through labor negotiations, student workers. A number of our salary pools along the way have contributed to that. But it also talks about the environment and the competition we are having to retain workers and put labor contracts into place. So this is the set of employee groups that are governed under the university's employment structure and the Board of Regents policy on employee group definitions. To help us better understand the data that we'll be talking about and the trends in these groups, we're going to take a few quick minutes just to define each of the groups. Faculty are categorized as tenured or tenure track and also include instructional staff engaged in teaching, research, and service in and outside of the classroom, and this generally includes full-time clinical professors, adjunct professors, and instructors as well. Academic professionals and administrative staff are commonly referred to as P&A, and they fill a diverse set of roles at the university and can be found at nearly every level of the organization. And I would say this entire employee group, outside of a handful of people, are on one-year appointments that are renewed annually. Professionals in training hold a unique role in the employee structure as they are found in teaching and research and are furthering their training in their field for a limited amount of time at the university. This includes residents and fellows and interns in the medical school, dentistry, pharmacy, vet med, and psychology. These are all examples of professionals in training. Civil service employees support both academic and administrative functions at the university, including research operations, IT, student services, accounting, management, and other areas. A majority of civil service are non-exempt employees. There are a portion of civil servants that are exempt. Our labor represented employees have exclusive representation and are governed by collective bargaining agreements. They include employees working in such areas as law enforcement, crafts, trades, clerical, technical, healthcare. There are 11 unions currently representing employees at the university, plus we potentially will have agreements with trade workers at UMD in the near future. At present, we are in mediation with the United Education Association, and that continues. And we are also in negotiation with graduate labor union, United Electrical, which represents our GAs or graduate assistants. And these are students registered in the graduate or post-baccalaureate degree program and working as a teaching or research assistant. We started negotiations last September, and we've been meeting regularly multiple times a month with their bargaining team. And we have been making progress on many non-economic matters, and shortly we'll be starting the negotiations on economic topics. So next, we are going to delve further into the employment structure and how it has changed over time. My colleague, Lincoln Coulson, the AVP of Institutional Analysis, will provide an overview of our employment data. Link?
Thank you and good afternoon, Vice President. Thank you, Vice President Horstman, Vice Chair Wheeler, and members of the committee. I apologize for not being able to be with you in person today. I appreciate your accommodation via Zoom. This is actually one of my favorite presentations to do because the workforce in the university is the workforce of the university is so complex and diverse in so many ways. And I almost guarantee you that I will leave you with additional questions, though I hope to answer some of your questions and provide some insight here. As Vice President Horstman mentioned, the information we're sharing today is from our official employee headcount snapshot, which is always the 9th pay period of the year, usually late October, for consistency year over year. Some of the ground rules are actual employee headcount changes really every day, certainly every pay period. But it does vary seasonally as well. Our headcount drops by about 10% in the summer versus academic year, so on and so forth. We talked about some of the exclusions, including undergraduate student workers. We actually employ at any one time maybe 8,000 undergraduate student workers, but their jobs are quite varied. That could be an undergraduate student worker that is going to an academic department office 2 hours a day. It could be a undergraduate worker doing a fitness class at Recwell or being an usher at Northrop. So there's a wide variety of those. We could talk about those if you want. Additionally, and I think importantly to understand the data, we have rule sets that force each employee into a primary job. So we're only counting each employee once. Some of our employees may have 2 or more job codes simultaneously. And I think picking up on some of the discussion this morning, Regent Gully, this might not be the best type of analysis to really look at the questions around term faculty. For example, my own experience, I've had an administrative job code as director or assistant vice president, and have taught courses in the higher ed policy program in the College of Education and Human Development. And even though I had 2 job codes simultaneously, my primary job was assistant vice president. I was only counted once, and that occurs across the university. But I will say that most employees at the University of Minnesota have a single job code, and and when we have two or more, it's pretty straightforward to identify a primary job code. Finally, all the data I'm talking about today are system-wide data, so patterns in individual campuses or colleges could certainly look different. We can talk about that. Next slide, please. This is the latest 10-year look of our employee count using the employee groups taxonomy that Vice President Horstman's just outlined. The first thing I'll note is the pandemic effect. Whenever you hear from me talking about longitudinal data, you'll have to endure the reminder from me about how the pandemic requires us to be careful about how we interpret changes and trend lines. Here it's very clear what happened in our employee counts during that time. And so as we talk today about these data, we'll talk about some of the fall 2022 to fall 2023 changes. But I think more interesting is some of the fall 2019, the last fall reporting period before the pandemic, to fall 2023 changes. We are certainly now finally understanding what maybe a new normal and a new reset is in our fall 2023 data. We have added 898 headcount from fall 2022 to 23, but compared to fall 2019, we are up 473 headcount, or about 1.7% increase in total over a 5-year period. We believe a significant portion of the hiring over the past year has been refilling vacant positions, but obviously there's been growth. But when we look at those growth in positions from fall 2019 to fall 2023, overall we grew 473 positions. But that includes growth of 750 positions in the medical school, growth of 94 positions, over 10% in the School of Public Health. You can imagine reasons for that, and we'll explore those a little bit. Growth of 32 positions in public safety, as the university has directed, but a decrease of 209 positions in the Twin Cities College of Liberal Arts, decrease of 129 positions at UMD, 53 at Morris, 17 at Crookston. Rochester has basically maintained but not grown their complement of a little over 100 headcount. So certainly units under enrollment pressure have seen long-time enrollment pressure have seen decreases in positions. We see a decrease of 170 positions in Twin Cities Auxiliary Services, so parking, food service, residential life, so on and so forth. So you can see how different pressures of the university would affect headcounts in different ways. And I'll just take you back to think about a slide that Vice President Thomason shared with you in December, showing the variance of how our colleges and campuses are funding, the bar charts with the various sizes showing O&M versus sponsored funding and such. And those funding variances certainly impact how the employee headcounts of our units move, and thus for the university overall. For the next slide, please. First, my apologies for the reference to the temporary casual employees. The temporary casual employees are not part of this analysis and not included in these counts. First, for this slide, full-time here means full-time, so 100% positions. Anything less, even 90% time, would be considered part-time for this particular part of the analysis. And note that this is full-time or part-time in pay period 9. So we certainly have employees that are on 9-month contracts or 10-month contracts, but if they were full-time in this pay period, they were counted as full-time. Of the part-time employees, all graduate assistants are classified as part-time. Standard graduate assistant appointment is 50% time, as well as a significant amount of the professionals in training, especially the medical residents, are part-time. We do have under 100% or part-time employees across other categories, but over 90% of our faculty, P&A, civil service, and labor represented employees were 100% full-time employees on this pay period 9 of 2023. One of the significant exceptions are, again, one of the things we talked about this morning, where there are a number of part-time employees in the lecturer and teaching specialist job codes, as well as faculty in various states of sabbatical leave or phased retirements. But much of the what we would consider the regular workforce of the university is full-time. Next slide, please. This is an interesting insight. So the budget office, under the direction of Vice President Tonneson, has engaged in what we used to call a cost benchmarking analysis. Maybe it's an expenditure category analysis now. And we've done that since fiscal year 2012. And the definitions were refreshed for the MPAC 2025 plan. This analysis puts all the university's expenditures into mission, operations, and administration categories. However, we can also turn this into a headcount analysis. So for quick orientation, the direct mission positions are activities that directly provide instruction, research, and public service. They're the doers of the mission. They're the professors, the research and teaching assistants, the clinical providers, the researchers of the institution. Operations includes activities that supplement and directly contribute to the mission delivery, the doers of the activities that round out the missions and create the full campus experience. So these can be people, everything from academic technologists to police officers to librarians, student service personnel would all be in operations. And then the administration category are costs for activities that conduct business and provide the organizational framework, processes, and directions to all university undertakings. So the doers of the activities around compliance and the efficient conduct of mission and operations. So here you have the university leadership, president, vice presidents, chancellors, so on. You have finance managers and analysts and directors, human resource professionals and consultants, clerical staff, administrative specialists, marketing and communications, and so on and so forth. And we've done this in some form every year since 2012, and really it becomes a check for all of us to see if we are investing money in appropriate ways, and always with the goal of trying to make sure that we are investing in the mission, the actual doers of the mission of the university, while understanding that as the university grows or changes, there will be needs in the operation and administration area. So I didn't know how this data was going to show up, but between 2019 and 2023, nearly 80% of the additional headcount has been directed towards mission-focused work. So I think we can be proud and happy of that. With that, the next slide, please. Another way to look at how headcount has changed. I apologize for the wall of numbers on these next two slides. These aren't data that we regularly produce, but they're important for the conversation. I think that many think that all of our university positions are funded from either the state of Minnesota funds or state plus tuition revenue. And so what I would point out here is that less than 40%, 38.8% to be exact, of University of Minnesota positions are 100% funded from state or tuition dollars. And between 2019 and 2023, so pre-pandemic to today, there are 607 fewer positions funded from 100% O&M sources. So that's about a 6% reduction. And so if we go to the next slide, this is the flip side of that. So these are the number of positions 100% not funded by operation and maintenance funds. So these are positions fully funded through sources such as research grants, foundation funds, clinical revenues, auxiliary revenues, and so on and so forth. So there are currently 13,176 positions in this category. That represents nearly 48% of all university positions. And here we have grown 737 positions system-wide. So this is where the headcount growth of the university has come from, not from state plus tuition funding. The remaining 12% or so of the positions are funded by a mix of O&M and non-O&M sources. So a common example would be a professor is funded through O&M funding for their teaching mission, while funding off of external grants and contracts might fund their research part of their professor salary. So if you think about that balance, and you go back to our medical school, which has added 750 headcount from 2019 to 2023, I can tell you that the medical school increased the number of positions fully funded by O&M by a grand total of 3. Meanwhile, there was a 680 headcount increase fully funded outside of O&M funds. So a lot of the growth of the university is being, the growth of the headcount is being funded from non-state, non-tuition sources. Next slide, please. A couple left on some of the diversity of the workforce. Women, number of women working at the university has hit a 10-year high in 2023, more than 15,000 employed, making up nearly 55% of the workforce. And let's go to the next slide. Quickly, the growth in employee diversity, the number of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, also referred to as BIPOC employees at the university, is also at a 10-year high, with nearly 5,500 people who identify as BIPOC employed in the system. I would note that even through the pandemic, we have added to the number of BIPOC employees in the university system every year over this time period, and something that I think we should be acknowledged to be proud of. And finally, my last slide, and then I'll turn it back to Ken, is just a breakdown of those same concepts, splitting out faculty versus staff. We want to see that those curves are both running in the right direction, and indeed they are. And we do sub-analysis on some of these on a regular basis. So for example, we're always looking at female faculty in STEM fields, for example, and the shape of those curves would encourage you as well. So we do look at subparts of this type of analysis all the time, though it is not, as I mentioned, it's not the end-all be-all analysis for everything we do for employee groups. So with that, I'll pass it back to Vice President Horstman to discuss sources of hire, turnover, and retirement information.
Thank you, Lincoln. Whether an open position is filled through an internal or external candidate varies depending on the employee category. For FY23, contract, adjunct, or term faculty roles and student positions were the most likely groups to be hired from externally, while leadership and academic administrative roles had the highest internal fill ratio at 58%. This is a reflection of turnover rates during fiscal year 23 for different key categories, including those who have been here less than a year, which typically would be a segment that you would see one of the higher turnover rates. We also have it by gender. We have it by BIPOC versus those that are not in that category. And we also have it by employee group, including leadership, which in this case includes assistant vice presidents and chancellors and associates in that category, as well as senior leadership, faculty, P&A, civil service, and labor represented. And for all of them, obviously, a majority is is voluntary. Our opportunities to address turnover as a challenge includes incorporating clear job descriptions into the onboarding process and working with employees through the first year to ensure their skill sets are growing to meet the role's responsibilities. These opportunities certainly could help us in areas where we have higher turnover. And we have been addressing known issues in this area in regard to underrepresented employees, civil service, and labor represented most recently. We believe that this kind of action, accompanied by supporting investment, will help meet the university's 2025 goal for both recruiting diverse students, faculty, and staff, as well as retaining them. In addition, we believe this also will increase job satisfaction with clear expectations and support structure in place to help employees succeed in their role. For broader context, the College and University Professional Association of Human Resources, or CUPA-HR, published its 2023 Employee Retention Survey. And this survey targeted all higher ed employees who are not faculty, which includes administrators, professionals, and non-exempt staff. During the 2022 to 23 academic year, voluntary turnover for higher ed staff was the highest it has been since it was started to be tracked by CUPA in 2017 to 18. Nationally, for full-time exempt staff, turnover has increased from a low of 7.9% in 20 to 21 to 12% in 21 to 22 and 14.3% in the past year. University of Minnesota's overall turnover rate for fiscal year 23 is 10.1%, down from 12.4% in FY22. As I said, the highest overall turnover for FY23 were those with less than a year of experience. And the lowest, according to this, according to our data, is faculty overall at 5.14%. Now, that does not mean that there aren't opportunities or issues with certain segments of faculty, but broadly across the system, they had the lowest turnover rate in the last fiscal year. As we look at an experience shift in retirement trends, I ask you to look at the light gray on this slide. You'll see that 2/3 of the categories are stable or at low risk of being in the retirement zone. We define employees entering the retirement risk zone starting at age 55. As an organization, we recognize institutional knowledge as a strength in an employee, and retirement means the loss of that expertise and productivity until a replacement can become fully effective. Since 2016, our retirement risk has shifted for all leadership categories, having 50% or more employees in the retirement risk zone, to Rochester now being the only one in that category. However, we see, However, we see pockets of retirement risk in academic administrative roles at Duluth and Morris. Morris also has obviously a higher risk in its labor representative staff. As we look deeper into this data, we have identified several likely reasons for overall decline in the retirement zone. There are generational shifts over the past 4 years across our system as a portion of boomer employees born between 47 and 64 dropped from 18% of the total population to 10. And during the same time, the millennial segment, born 81 to 2000, grew from 33 to 38%. Gen Z, the most recent generation to enter the workforce, grew from 1% to 7% in the most recent year. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, this data does not include student workers, and it does not include graduate assistants, professionals in training, or temp casual employees when we talk about turnover. This data does show that there are succession planning opportunities for leaders and P&A staff, as well as others. We will also need to seek out candidates for technical roles and other skill gaps in the future. The university's most recent entire retirement incentive option occurred during the pandemic and ended in January of 2021, resulting in over 700 faculty and staff taking the position, primarily staff. Since then, in FY22, we had 670 employees retire from the university, and in FY23, the number was 512. So I will close today with looking at our challenges and opportunities given the current environment at the university and in higher education. Among the top areas, we seek to understand our changes in demographics and how they could impact both our pool of potential employees and enrollment. On the enrollment side, there's obviously greater competition for students as the number of college-age students declines. Tight fiscal restraints also impact our ability as an employer to remain competitive on compensation, which we have heard a bit about today, and which can lead to employee turnover. In addition, a broader trend that the university and other employers are confronting is the impact of stress and burnout. The effect of the time frame of 2020 and forward seems like it was a long time ago, but employees, as any supervisor will tell you, are still recovering from those experiences, and there are impacts to their family and in the communities they live in still. We continue to refine our strategy in attracting and retaining employees by addressing campus climate, supporting hybrid work environments, and remaining committed to our Impact 2025 focus on recruiting and retaining underrepresented faculty and staff. We also continue our commitment to better understanding the employee experience through the Employment Engagement Survey and the Campus Climate Survey in partnership with the Office of Equity and Diversity. We also seek to create more paths for professional growth through phase 1 of the PEAK initiative. We are starting to see increased career opportunities in the HR, finance, and marketing communications functions. These changes have provided current staff with opportunities to grow their skills and competencies to better manage this process at scale. We are currently developing talent profiles as a pilot and as a blueprint for leaders, and we're starting with the IT and HR job families. These profiles will help senior leaders and supervisors identify, develop, and coach talent by role within their organization, and will hopefully provide opportunities system-wide while remaining in their current location without having to move. That is our hope. We also continue to enhance our recruitment and retention efforts through consulting. Our OHR team for equity, diversity, and inclusion is meeting and dialoguing with leadership in various colleges and administrative offices to help develop and grow their understanding of intercultural capacity and competency through a process known as the Intercultural Development Inventory. And that is an intentional project, not just a one-time survey that helps leaders build their capacity in that area and then transition their knowledge that they've learned and their experience into projects and see how that impacts the outcome. So it is a long-term effort, but we are excited about where that will lead us. Additionally, our work with flexibility framework provides guidance to colleges and units on implementing a range of work options. The 2023 Coupa survey again points to hybrid and remote work arrangements in higher ed as being a key tool for retention. So as I finish up, and I believe later in this year we will have a more complete rendition of our 2023 employee engagement survey for you. And we heard a little bit during mission fulfillment today. I'll just end by saying the results show that the 10 years of effort in prioritizing employee engagement at the university and addressing concerns have resulted in a 10-point increase in the number of staff who say they work in an effective environment. The portion of faculty who report the same has remained stable over the 10 years. The number of engaged staff is at an all-time high, which we are particularly pleased with considering what the challenges have been that we have described the past 4 years. In addition, the number of employees who are defined by the survey as frustrated, this means they have high commitment and dedication, but view the work environment as ineffective, has declined over the course of the survey and is at the lowest point it has been. So with that, Vice Chair Wheeler, members of the committee, we conclude our presentation and we welcome your questions and comments.
Great, thank you so much, Vice President Horstman. That was a really deep snapshot into the people who really make this place work for so many. So thank you for that. Regent Turner, you had a question.
Thank you, Chair Wheeler. Vice President Horstman, hi. Hi. Okay, so going back to the graph that is the employee counts by job code group, that particular slide. So I just did a little bit of figures here, and I noted that from 2014 to 2023, the labor part has gone down by 734. The category of the civil service from 2014 to 2023 has gone up by 694. Now, the reason I quick did this is because, you know, the little bit of time I've been here, the scuttlebutt rumors that with the peak, that potentially some of the union jobs are being transferred as they gain in expertise and doing system-wide.
Regent Turner, I'm
change.
sorry to interrupt, but can you put the microphone a little bit closer to you?
I'm so
Thank you.
sorry.
No problem.
Oh, forgot about that. Do I have to reiterate what I
I'm
just
hearing-
said?
I heard you just
the
fine.
It's more for the feed than anything.
Oh,
yeah.
all right, so sorry. Okay, like I said, between that time period, labor's gone down by 734 and civil's gone up by 694. There's concerns that with peak, et cetera, as jobs kind of change, et cetera, that some of those labor jobs are actually going to civil service. Now, I was kind of going on that until I saw the slide about the non-funded, you know, are some of these civil service jobs actually being created by the increase in the research part? You know what I'm saying? Under the not O&M funded, but don't forget about the first part of it, because that is the big worry with peak, is that we're not decreasing labor jobs or just turning them into some different category. So that's my first little question.
Vice Chair Wheeler, Regent Turner, I will try to answer the first question and a little bit the second one, and then I will defer to my colleague, AVP Coulson, for any insight he would offer. In regard to the change in labor positions and civil service positions, and frankly, as you look at P&A, I do think over time, the nature of work changes. I can go back, I started here in 2014. A couple years before that, open enrollment at the university was paper-based, which every year meant 50 to 60,000 pieces of paper that had to be entered transactionally. By the time I came here, that was not the case, and it was all online, self-service. So that factors into it. That's one tiny example. In regard to peak, we are not, that is not a goal of peak to reduce labor positions and have more civil service positions.
Okay.
We actually, and I would, with gratitude and thanking Regent Gully and you for bringing this forward from what you heard, we now have a dialogue coming up with the AFSCME presidents around this topic. And we will bring in the peak directors who run the operations centers, and we'll have a dialogue around how these positions were set. We are also doing a review of them internally with our comp team to make sure what we decided was accurate, which we think it is. And people can grow and shift to other employee groups here. It's a complex area, so if they want to move forward and do another type of work, that possibly can take them out of it. What I am still very committed to is in no way should this be an environment where someone, for their own purposes, decides it's better to have someone in one group than another and the work is the same. That is not something I would agree with either. We also, I think, as part of the funding question you answered, civil servants do support mission work. They are involved in research. There are needs there that come up for different types of research. Link, I don't know if you would have anything to add there.
Thank you, Vice President Horstman. Not really. I would just say that the picture on the positions 100% not funded by O&M funds is pretty complex underneath the hood there. So that can be everything from a brand new research grant where they're hiring fresh new people to do that work, all the way to changes in various parts of auxiliary services, which is a wide range of activities as well. Everything from dining services to athletics to running centers like Recwell or the Twin Cities Union. So there's a lot of things going on that underneath that slide that would need to be unpacked.
Mm-hmm. I have another head count question. So the head count of the administrative count, you said from 2019 to 23, it went up by 61.
Mm-hmm.
What was it in 19? 0?
I'm going to defer to Link here. He may have it in front of him. I don't.
Let me see if I can pull that up quickly, because I do have some of this in front of me.
Mainly because this is what legislators are always going on about, the administrative costs, et cetera.
Well,
So that's why I'm bringing this up.
Regent Turner, I mean, during the pandemic, we had what we eventually called a hiring pause. And at that time, for a couple of years, we had about a 35% reduction in our pace of hiring. And that left a lot of positions open, staff positions. Added on to that was the retirement incentive program that in early 21 took 700 people out of here. So that's the dip you see. But that kind of voluntary reduction, you cannot hold year over year unless it's built in to your budget. So we held that for a lengthy period of time. And then as needs started to pick up as we came out of the pandemic, hiring picked up.
Right.
I do not think necessarily that the same exact hires were made coming out of it due to changing needs. If you listen to Interim Chancellor McMillan, Duluth still has a number of staff openings that they have not been able to fill.
Yeah.
And I will give you, so if I can indulge me for 2 more seconds. So in the fall 2019 count, with the definitions in the cost benchmarking study, we had 4,208 employees in what we considered that administration bucket. And in 2023, we had 4,269.
Okay.
The percentages are almost against the entire employee base, went from 15.4% of total headcount in the administrative bucket in 2019 to 15.2% in the administrative bucket in 2023.
And then the last, is the turnover rate of like 4.11 or 5.11 for faculty, is that low compared to other universities? Is that doesn't, is that a lot?
We have pure data. I would have to review that and bring that back to you. There have been years when it's a little higher. I think the highest it's been in the last several years that I saw at one point in time was 9%. And like I said, I know what Professor B's conversation has been, and this doesn't dismiss any retention challenges they may have or desired faculty that we have challenges hiring and bringing in because of the market. You know, I am sure that there are those cases out there.
And I don't want to do that either with making note of this, but it would go against the whole concept of potentially using that as to the legislators if they're in fact looking like they're very content on one side and the other report on the other. Just an observation.
Great, thank you. You know, and we're making several chair changes today, so I have a hard stop here now, but our esteemed board chair, Janie Mayron, has agreed to take, and there's so much intense interest in here, and several of you have remaining questions, so I think we just keep running with this topic, but unfortunately I can't run with you right now, so we'll turn it over. Yeah,
Mid-meeting?
Regent Gully. I'll be back.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chair.
I don't have a bullpen here, so I would.
I just had a quick follow-up. I know this, or a request for follow-up. I know this data does not include temp casual and adjuncts. Is it possible? I realize that it's not possible to suddenly integrate them into the PP9 snapshot, but is it possible to do a follow-up with what you know about similar information about temp casual and adjunct?
I can commit to looking at that, Regent Gully, and trying to bring something back to you that's meaningful.
Just a quick follow-up, I guess, would be, is there a way, I would love for us to consider for next year and for the future, thinking about ways that we can integrate temp casual and adjuncts into the survey mechanisms that we're already using.
Regent Davenport.
Thank you, Chair Mayron.
You're welcome.
I have a question for AVP Kelson, who everyone should know is an exceptional institutional analyst. So if we look at slides 46, 47, 48, and it follows up a little on your question, Regent Turner, could you clarify, and you did, I think, in your presentation a bit, the definition of academic administrative positions? Because I think what I heard you say is that it includes not just senior leadership, but it's directors, clerical, marketing, communications, and such, because I think, I guess across the country in higher ed data, it's not real clear what gets counted in that bucket.
Yep.
Whichever chair we have, Chair Mayron.
I'm the chair du jour.
For an hour.
Yes, this is gets a little complicated, and we do apologize. So let me try to take you through two concepts here. One is the concept of the academic administrative category that you're seeing in our job code groups. That is the A in P&A, but consists of a group of longstanding job codes. So in the academic administrative job code group includes the president and vice presidents, but it also includes the chief auditor, but all sorts of employees like student services supervisors, assistant vice presidents, chancellors, deans, associate deans, assistant deans, head librarians, human resource managers, vice provosts, compliance officers. There's scroll down here and see we have 386 job codes totaling 1,838 employees. Some of that is very historical. I will tell you, Vice President Horstman and I and Vice President Tonneson have had questions about why do we split out academic professional versus academic administrative, and Vice President Horstman assures me that there are good reasons to continue to do that. So we do. But to your question, is exactly why Vice President Tonneson and I started the whole cost benchmarking study several years ago, because there is no one definition of the administration. There's no national standard for it. They've removed the descriptor in iPads, for example. So we have undertaken those studies, and that's what you saw on the mission, operations, and administration slide, to at least be able to consistently benchmark for ourselves what we mean in those three categories. And when we have refreshed that methodology, it is, and Vice President Tonneson, please hop in here, but it is really talking to lots of the current leadership, current people on campus. I think Vice President Tonneson went into many units and talked to them and said, what do you think really qualifies as administration? And so, but then we put some rigor to it and say, okay, it's these job codes with these counts, and we're going to keep counting it that way each and every year, so we can at least benchmark against ourselves. So there's two things going on there as people try to zero in on administration. I don't know if Vice President Tonneson wants to add anything there.
Vice President Tonneson, do you have anything to say?
Chair Mayron, I believe Associate Vice President Carlson got it right. I don't need to add anything.
Okay, I'm good. Are you good? Okay. I was the last person, I'll call myself. But actually, Regent Turner picked up on what I was going to ask, and that is the slide having to do with employee turnover rates vary. And I wanted to ask the question of how do we compare to our peers? I understand we can view ourselves, but I'm also interested, as we always want to look at best practices, how we're faring against our peers. Not to say that ends the discussion, but it gives us a context for the discussion.
Chair Mayron, members of the committee, in regard to faculty, I will have to follow up with you to provide that to make sure I'm speaking accurately. In regard to staff, the Coupa comparison is a good one because that is higher ed, that is national, and that average was slightly higher than what we've experienced overall in the last couple of years. So I think we're in that range, but I will have to review the faculty piece and bring it to the board office.
And then as I look at that chart as well, it appears that under the BIPOC group, civil service and labor representative, we've got turnover of 10%, or in excess of 10% for each of those categories. Have you developed an understanding as to why those numbers are so much higher and are higher in those groups than the other groups?
Again, Chair Mayron, this is a very system-wide look at what is a culmination of some very decentralized experiences across the university. I would say generally in the areas where we have higher turnover, if you exclude for those here less than 2 years, which typically has turnover even if you do onboarding well, we have opportunities in our onboarding and employee training and development that I think could positively impact turnover in those areas. We do see that, and I don't think it's a lack of diligence or care, but it's probably a little bit of a lack of know-how and resources at times. So that is something we have to work hard to solve. Okay. That would have an impact.
Thank you. Any other discussion for our presenters? All right, hearing none, we're going to take a short recess, 10-minute recess, and then we will come back and work on the rest of our schedule for today. I call the Finance and Operations Committee back to order. Our third item is to review the progress toward the sustainability goals of the MPAC 2025 System-Wide Strategic Plan. This is an annual report required by board policy. Here to provide the update is Shane Stennis, Chief Sustainability Officer. Thanks for joining us today, and please proceed, Chief Sustainability Officer Stennis.
Thank you very much, Chair Mayron and members of the board, student representatives. It's great to be here with you today to present the update on sustainability goals and progress around our sustainability efforts across the University of Minnesota system. I want to start by putting those efforts into some context. I think it's helpful to see sort of how this work connects into our institutional commitments, and then also how does it relate to the things that are happening outside of the university and in the broader world. So I'll start with that institutional commitment component and really focus on the university's sustainability policy. In 2004, the board passed the policy Sustainability and Energy Efficiency. The policy identifies 6 guiding principles to inform the work across the university system around sustainability, and it identifies that sustainability work is the collective effort of the entire University of Minnesota community. It also charges the president or their designate with setting targets and goals for each campus around sustainability and mandates this report annually to the Board of Regents on progress toward those goals and targets. The other piece of our institutional commitment, of course, is our strategic plan, MPAC 2025. And in that plan, we committed to building a fully sustainable future as one of the core goals of that effort. In addition to the goal, we identified action items to advance it and have been progressing along the path of moving those forward over the course of the last couple of years. The policy and the strategic plan are ambitious commitments. They represent a shift in the desired outcome for the institution's mission. They also imply that the status quo we have today is not sustainable and that we must change how we work. But when we say we want to build a fully sustainable future, what do we mean? What does it mean for our institution? These are important questions, and by applying different frameworks, we are building shared understanding and creating a purpose and direction for our work. This is one of the frameworks that we use to kind of think about that question, and I want to present to you today for thought and to help inform the conversation from here. This is the donut economics model, shaped because it looks like or called that way because it looks like a donut, which are tasty and delicious and memorable. And it's developed by Kate Raworth. She's an economist and researcher at Oxford and Cambridge University, and she has a wonderful book called Donut Economics, which I encourage you to pick up and read if you have a chance. In the center of the diagram, or the whole of the donut, are many things that people need for a good life. These include things like water, shelter, food, and health, but also social connection, meaning and work, and agency. For those of you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, imagine that hierarchy in the center of the donut. Raworth describes that part as the social foundation for human prosperity. When society doesn't have the things in the center of the donut, people aren't thriving, and humanity experiences a shortfall. Outside the donut are all the natural systems that we depend on to sustain life, including fresh water, a stable climate, clean air, the ozone layer, healthy ecosystems, and a host of other functions. These things on the outside make the center of the donut possible. They're natural systems. They're finite. They have limits. When we stress them too much through pollution, high levels of resource consumption, species extinction, and other impacts, we exceed the ecological ceiling. This significantly degrades Earth's ability to support life, including our own. In short, we overshoot what the planet can provide on an ongoing basis, spending natural capital we do not have. At the present moment, humanity is failing to meet both the social foundation and to stay within ecological boundaries. And this is what sustainability is trying to address. It's the sort of simplest model I can think of to explain sort of the package deal of what we're trying to do. It's how do we meet that social foundation for society without exceeding the ecological ceiling? To live in the safe space where we achieve human prosperity in a flourishing web of life. Or as we put it at the university, to build a fully sustainable future. The remainder of the presentation will highlight how we are incorporating this objective into the institution and how we are changing what we do and how we do it in response. And I want to start off with climate action. The university's efforts to address climate change, which is one of the action items identified in MPAC 2025. As we've talked about before with the board, through the combustion of coal, gasoline, diesel, natural gas, and other human activities, society is releasing enormous quantities of greenhouse gas pollution. This is trapping more heat from the sun, warming the earth, acidifying oceans, and leading to significant rapid changes in the Earth's climate. Humanity and other species have thrived and depend on a stable climate, so this rapid extreme change poses real threats to prosperity and flourishing. This is a challenge for current and future generations of humanity, but we won't share in the impacts equally, which is what this figure begins to illustrate. This graph comes from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. A fun fact, it was actually developed by a native Minnesotan here in Minneapolis. The black line running up and down the image represents the year 2020. Left of the line are color bands showing actual recorded global temperature change compared to a historical average. Right of the line are color bands showing projected temperatures depending on how good we are at eliminating the emissions that cause climate change. You might recall Dr. Roop saying last May that the more we emit, the worse it gets. The right-hand side of the graph, that's a visual representation of that phenomenon. And this is not something far off in the future, but it is and will be something that people in this room today have experienced and will continue to experience. That experience will be different based on when you were born, which is illustrated by the set of human silhouettes on the bottom of the figure. I find it helpful to translate that part into personal terms, and I invite the board to do so as well. For me, the bottom row of figures is someone like my dad. Born in the 1940s after World War II, he passed away in 2020 and experienced about 1 degree Celsius or 1.8 Fahrenheit of warming, enough to be noticeable in the things that mattered to him as someone who lived in northern rural Minnesota. Ice out dates, migratory birds, and spring planting came earlier, but the change was not massively disruptive. I'm in the middle. I was born in 1977, and by the time I reached my 70th birthday, I could experience anything from 1.5 to 2 degrees C of change. Finally, the top set of figures are like my kids, our future students here at the University of Minnesota. Both were born around 2010, and by the time they are in their 70s and 80s, they could experience anything from 2 to 4 degrees C of warming. The latter would be catastrophic, likely leading to massive climate and weather pattern disruption, continuous flooding of major coastal cities, food shortages, and a refugee crisis larger than any we've experienced. Through our actions, we have a chance to impact which of these scenarios comes to pass and how that temperature increase impacts humanity. And we do so by preventing the emissions that create climate change and by preparing for the impacts of climate change by adapting our built and natural environments to accommodate and to respond to it. As you know, our campuses are actively engaged in both prevention and preparation through the climate action planning process. Twin Cities and Duluth campuses have already completed and presented their plans to the board. The Rochester campus is in the planning stage right now and will bring its plan to the board for the discussion this summer. Crookston is kicking off their planning process this spring, and Morris will begin later this year. And we are already moving into implementation projects and initiatives that advance strategies in the existing plans and what we expect will appear in the future plans as well. These projects include things like installation of renewable energy, reducing energy consumption in our buildings, and supplying heat and cooling to buildings through emissions-free technologies. They also involve changes to how we get people to and around campus and addressing the emissions from university air travel. Finally, the implementation process is focused on preparing our infrastructure, community, and natural resources for the impacts of climate change that will come. In relation to this body of work, board members have previously asked if the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, can help pay for some of the costs of these actions. The answer is yes. The IRA has been referred to as the largest climate bill in history. It was signed into law by President Biden in August of 2022 and will mobilize between $300 billion and $1 trillion from the federal government to address climate change. Most of this money is being delivered in the form of tax credits and deductions available over a 10-year period for implementing clean energy technologies. For the first time, the tax credits are being made available to nonprofits like the U in the form of direct payments from the U.S. Treasury. In 2023, we began advancing many efforts that we anticipate will benefit from these credits. This includes over 3.5 megawatts of on-campus solar that is either in design or construction, the purchase of 18 electric vehicles and 2 plug-in hybrids for the university fleet, and the installation of geothermal and battery storage systems to support facility energy needs. This work represents a promising start to implementing our climate plans, and we will need to expand the scope and scale of this work to realize our goals. We also have an extensive body of work addressing climate change through delivery of our core mission. When we look at scores on the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, our research and engagement efforts related to climate are among the top scoring programs in the world. I want to emphasize that. Top scoring programs in the world. University programs like the Midwest Climate Adaptation Science Center, the Minnesota Climate Adaptation Partnership, and the Morris Model are helping communities across the state and region understand the impacts of climate change and to implement solutions. And the reach of our efforts extends globally. As we have for many years, last fall, the university sent a delegation of graduate students, faculty, and staff to the UN climate talks. This included Dr. Famara Damfa, pictured on the slide here, a research scientist at the Institute on the Environment, who provided expertise on climate loss and damage as a party delegate to the Gambia. Efforts in climate action are essential to create a sustainable future, but they alone are not sufficient. The challenges facing humanity encompass multiple ecological and social issues in addition to climate change, which is why Impact 2025 also calls for the institution to demonstrate state and worldwide leadership in sustainability through our teaching, our research, and our convening power. To assess progress in this area, we are using two external measures. The first is the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, which we presented to the Mission Fulfillment Committee of the board in October. The impact rankings measure university contributions to advancing the Global Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. SDGs are a set of 17 outcomes and associated indicators that over 190 countries have agreed to. Year over year, we have improved or maintained scores on the impact rankings. The other tool we use is called the Sustainable Tracking Assessment and Rating System, or STARS. STARS is a transparent framework for colleges and universities to measure their sustainability performance. It covers all aspects of the university activity, such as course offerings, learning outcomes, co-curricular programs, research, operations, construction, purchasing, workforce, and the endowment. The university was involved in the development of STARS more than a decade ago, and it has become the preeminent tool for sustainability assessment. Our goal is for each campus to achieve a gold rating on the tool, the second highest level possible. The results from these two assessment tools indicate that we are demonstrating that state and worldwide leadership in sustainability, and they have also identified opportunities for us to grow and improve on that impact. The next several slides will highlight efforts that are contributing to that progress and the growth opportunities across all elements of the mission. These examples will include both system-wide as well as campus-specific programs or initiatives of note from 2023. As we go through them, I hope that you will see how sustainability is not something that we do as an add-on in addition to other things, but rather it's integral to the performance and realization of our mission. You'll also note that on several of the slides, we have identified board policy or work plan items related to the topic. As Regent Kenyanya had noted previously at a different board meeting, almost all of the board's work can impact sustainability. The board's policy on sustainability has played an important role in university efforts over the past 2 decades. As we consider the challenges of the next decades, deeper integration of sustainability into all domains of the university will be critical. We offer up these connections for the board's consideration and discussion. Now I'll start with education. The thousands of students that graduate from the university every year are our most impactful force for building a fully sustainable future. Ensuring they graduate with the sustainability-related competencies, skills, and literacy will prepare them to create this future in their workplaces, communities, and homes. To support students in bringing sustainability into their educational experience, the university hosts a number of system or campus-wide programs that provide sustainability learning opportunities for students independent of their respective degree. These include curricular offerings like the online sustainability minor initiated by colleagues at our Crookston campus. This minor is available to any student on any university campus in any major. We also have a number of system-wide co-curricular offerings. This includes Self-Sustain, a program connecting student leaders across all of our campuses to learn from each other and to collaborate on initiatives. And the last gathering of Self-Sustain is pictured here at the UMD campus from fall of 2023. And the system-wide Sustainability Symposium, an opportunity for students to showcase their sustainability projects, research, and creative works. In addition to overarching programs, it's imperative that individual academic programs and degrees are taking action to incorporate sustainability too. The School of Nursing on the Twin Cities campus is one incredible example of how this is beginning to happen. Through the leadership of nursing faculty member Dr. Teddy Potter and Dean Connie Delaney, the school has taken a number of steps to incorporate sustainability into students' learning experiences and to provide leadership across the nursing profession. They are transforming nursing curriculum through the application of the Planetary Health Education Framework. The vision is to prepare nurses around the world to conduct research, educate, advocate, and practice in ways that support health comprehensively for people and ecosystems. Efforts such as these are well aligned with the needs of major employers in Minnesota. Businesses and organizations that hire our students share our commitment to addressing sustainability and are looking for students that can help them advance their goals. Addressing the needs of businesses and organizations and communities around the state also requires the university to develop innovations and insights to tackle sustainability challenges. To support this need, the university has a number of academic programs to encourage new sustainability scholarship and to develop academics in the early stages of their careers. This includes MinDrive Seed Grants, which funded 9 new projects in 2023 that will reduce climate change and its impacts, enhance biodiversity, and clean the air, soil, or water. And the Impact Grants, which funded 4 projects in 2023 focused on microplastics in the environment, carbon markets for food recovery, water quality monitoring, and local food systems research. These efforts are made possible through funding from the state of Minnesota, and each grant involves extensive partnership with Minnesota communities and organizations. These projects and many others reinforce the critical role the university plays in developing the technologies, insights, and solutions needed to realize a fully sustainable future, as the director of the National Science Foundation and President Ettinger noted in their op-ed this fall. An example of how we are delivering on this need is the Innova tree, developed by the Natural Resources Research Institute, and I know you've heard much about it already. As Dr. Priya shared with the board in December, the tree is a climate change fighting champion. It grows faster than other varieties, quickly removes carbon from the atmosphere, and provides shade that will become increasingly important as climate change drives an increase in extreme heat. The work of building a fully sustainable future requires the university to be a leader and partner beyond our walls as well. That's why it's critical that we are actively engaged with communities and organizations beyond the institution to put our capabilities in service to others and collaborate with them to advance sustainability in other contexts. University units like RSDP, CERTS, the Sustainable Development Goals Initiative, Office of Public Engagement, the Hennepin University Partnership, the Corporate Engagement Center, and many others are essential connector between the university and these external stakeholders. They play a critical role in building relationships with external partners, identifying needs, convening people, and matching university capabilities to Minnesota communities and organizations. There's perhaps no better case study of the impact effective outreach has in the community of Morris. The university, through the Morris campus, the West Central Research and Outreach Center, and RSDP, is engaged with the city, county, and medical center and school district in the Morris model. The Morris model is a partnership working toward a shared vision of advancing a sustainable community. Through this work, the community has become nationally and internationally renowned for its sustainability efforts. This work has included development of a new water treatment facility for the community on university land. Through the Climate Smart Municipalities program hosted by the Institute on the Environment, the community has also been hosting interns from Germany the past few years. Recently, one of those interns helped characterize the performance of that drinking water treatment plant. Finally, making university operations sustainable is critical to ensuring the institution's ongoing ability to thrive and deliver its mission. As an anchor institution, Minnesotans are looking for the university to lead through example. And integrating sustainability into our operations can directly reduce costs and risks and provide value to the university and society. In 2023, we worked on developing new approaches to funding sustainability efforts in the climate plans. We leveraged our collective capacity to pursue grants and incorporated common sets of sustainability criteria in key procurement activities. These efforts also have a positive impact on our students. If we want students to go out and build a fully sustainable future in their workplaces and communities after graduation, the learning that they have and the experience they have here is advanced by having a tangible example of what sustainability entails and an opportunity to be involved hands-on in crafting it. And sustainability in operations contributes positive impressions on the part of the prospective students and employees, affecting their interest in joining the institution. Words are important, but actions matter to these stakeholders. That's why efforts like the universal and employee transit passes are so critical. These 2 passes provided members of the Twin Cities campus community unlimited transit access, which breaks down barriers to employment and attendance, addresses equity, and reduces pollution that impacts climate and health. Participation in this program has boomed with over 22,000 students activating their pass, up from an average of 10,000, and 6,600 employees have requested their pass, which is up from more than 1,000 before the program existed. As of September of this last year, we had logged 1.2 million rides on the pass program, and there was a 61% increase in ridership due to the Universal Transit Pass from September 22 to September of 23. These transit programs and the other examples I shared with you today are just some of the incredible work and sustainability that has happened across the university over the past year. It is good work, it is impactful, and we should celebrate all of it. I think we should also take the opportunity to reflect on whether it's enough. If we continue on this path, will we achieve human prosperity and a flourishing web of life? Or will we realize a fully sustainable future? Achieving those aims will require a completely different approach than the one that has brought us to this present moment. To paraphrase Albert Einstein, we can't solve our problems with the same thinking that we used to create them. And the university can be instrumental in this work if we choose to be. At our best, we bring the unimaginable into being through our students' scholarship, engagement, and example. I look forward to engaging with you in discussion about that future, how to advance it through the board's work, and what information and tools you would like in that endeavor. With that, I'll conclude and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Inspiring and scary at the same time.
We're great at parties. So.
Yes, yeah, I bet you are. Regent Turner.
Yep. Thank you, Chair Mayrod. 2 questions for you. So what are we doing to cut down on our trash that ultimately goes to the Herc incinerator? And then the other one, you went back about we're number 3 for zero hunger. Okay, what does that mean when I was just at the UGS, is that undergrad?
USG.
Did I get it wrong? USG. Okay, USG.
Anyway,
great group of people. Anyway, and one of their biggest things was still this food desert concept, and that what the number one thing that would help in their minds, student life, is a grocery store on campus.
Sure.
So how does that match up with us being number 3? And what does zero hunger mean?
Chair Mayeron, Regent Turner, thanks for the question. So let me answer the question about recycling, trash, composting. So the university has programs throughout our campuses to put recycling and organics collection or compost collection into place. And we are actively working on a number of different fronts across each of our facilities to develop new programs and ways around how do we get more of our waste stream out of the trash and into recycling, composting, or reuse. So generally speaking, that applies across the board. Specific to the Twin Cities campus, within the last couple years, our focus has really been on making composting available for people in buildings like this. So it's publicly accessible. You would go to the Union today and you would find compost containers where you could throw away your banana peel or your apple core or your leftovers from lunch, for example. And we do that really actively with food service on campus. So we're making sure that the materials that they're serving food on are also compostable. And that's a real big focus because food waste is sort of the next, I would say, big area of opportunity for us, or that organic waste that we can then continue to pull and remove from that trash stream and reduce the amount of waste that we send to the HERC. So our strategy really is around how do we reduce how much waste we create, and then with the waste that is generated, how do we make sure that that gets put into either recycling, composting, or reuse as much as possible? So that's really the focus there.
Are we making significant progress?
Yeah, so we can get you updated figures. I think we have increased our diversion rate on the Twin Cities campus. I'm going to get this number roughly wrong, but it's moving from about 40% up to 50% over the course of the last several years as a result of those kinds of programs. And we can get you exact data. Regarding the Zero Hunger metric on the Sustainable Development Goals Initiative, that measures comprehensively our programs through the curricular experience, like how many students are we graduating in agricultural related careers. It measures things like how much research do we publish on hunger and food systems. And then it also does measure the existence of programs on our campuses that look at reducing student and staff hunger and exposure to hunger, but it doesn't necessarily reflect all the level of detail that some of the issues the students at USG highlighted for you, and doesn't get into that level of detail and precision because it's trying to look at us in aggregate as an institution.
Sorry about that question.
No, that's a good question. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Turner. I have a question, and that is, in terms of the available dollars that is devoted to sustainability, and this may be very simple, and it may be very wrong, so you'll correct me, but it seems to me we can devote dollars to changing human behavior, or we can, and additionally, we can devote dollars to technology that assumes humans aren't going to be enough to change what's happening in our climate, but we need a technology fix to address what's going on with our climate. And I think about that, in my view, so much of what we're dealing with today is a result of the consequences of technology that brought a lot of good to us, but at the same time brought us a lot of bad. And I'm also thinking about, I read in the last couple of weeks that someone, not at the university, but someone that was working on a shield that would get put into space that basically would be able to block or some of the, I don't know if it's the sun's rays or whatever, but to address what's happening in our environment. So not having great confidence that humans will change their behavior, what's the amount of dollars or percentage we're using to focus our research on pure technology? Like the trees is a perfect example. Doesn't require, other than me planting the tree, it doesn't require me to do much more than that. And presumably it's going to, like a Pac-Man, chew up some of the bad things that we've done. How much is devoted to addressing technology, a technology fix versus human behavior fix?
So, Chair Mayron, it's a wonderful question, and I can't give you a precise answer. Because I think that the approach that we generally use sort of commingles both. And what I would say in that regard is we think about this from a standpoint of, you're absolutely right, like doing behavioral change alone is not enough, and doing technology innovation alone is not enough. What we really need to do is marry those two things together and think about how do we change systems. So we really focus in a sustainability context about systems change, and we think about humanity is a complex adaptive system. And so in a complex adaptive system, there's all sorts of unpredictable results you get when you start to intervene in the system. And so it's a complex question around sort of like, how do we, I think what you're fundamentally asking is, how do we drive forward the change that is required? And are we spending our dollars institutionally on the right things? From a standpoint of the problem, it is a complex systems problem. And in terms of the dollars spend, I would say that is sort of kind of the thesis of what I've tried to tee up for you at the very end, is this opportunity to think about what does a future look like? How do we start making that pivot to a future that's different, but not having all the answers or solutions yet to how we would make that transition, of course. One final thing I would say is there's no sustainable organization in the world, full stop. There's many organizations that are trying. There are many institutions, businesses, corporations, cities, communities that are working hard on this. But it is an unsolved challenge, and I think it is a long-term challenge. And so as you think about sort of the future ahead, and also particularly the search for a new president and the contemplation of future strategic plans, the thing I would like to leave you with is an impression that this is an ongoing need of the institution. It's not something that we can check off the box of MPAC 2025 when we're done. We've made good progress. We can celebrate the milestones that we've reached, but there's a lot of work left to do.
And just in response, when I look at a lot of what you presented, which is wonderful in terms of what our campuses are doing, I'm still struck by the fact what it is addressing is what's going on in that campus, in that geographic community. And my own personal view is what the world needs is a global fix. And that, I don't think we're going to be able to change the behaviors across the globe. But through technology, we may be able to change the trajectory that we're currently on. So I would be interested in spending our dollars at the university more on research and technology that could solve the world problem, because it is a global problem, rather than focusing dollars on what's going on at the Twin Cities campus versus Rochester versus Morris Crookston, which is all laudable, but it's not going to solve the problem, which is, we all know we don't have much time. That's my personal worry. Any other questions or comments? Regent Kenyanya?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Senes, for the presentation.
Okay.
You know, I feel like just over the past year, we've, in one form or another, had the sustainability conversation probably more times than I can think of in the years before. So I think that's just the first testament to the attention. The work isn't new. I'm just saying it being elevated at this level with this frequency. So definitely want to point that out. You know, my takeaway from this discussion and the recent ones is it's the urgency, right? I mean, I feel like that's the point in terms of, you know, I think not all, but most people are on board and understand that climate change is happening and what we're doing on our planet. But you know, we're on board until it's hard, until it's uncomfortable, until we're forced to make a, you know, I think most people recycle because it's relatively easy, but we don't compost. I don't compost, you know, because now that's a little more uncomfortable, right? And looking at your questions for discussion, and I like the way this is framed because this is really turning it back to us. You know, with us being on board, what we obviously lack is just the subject area expertise, or just the lens to actually look at our, you know, in your other slide, one of the things you put, and you don't have to go back, is enrollment plans under, like, you know, the stuff that is affected. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what lens to look at enrollment plans, look at sustainability and enrollment plans together. I don't have that. That's what we need, obviously, from you as those discussions come up to kind of help us see where those interlinks are and that interplay. So obviously that could inform our decision. That I would say is you and the team behind you. That's your work. Ours is then to now make tough and uncomfortable decisions. Because at what point do we look at something and we're like, we're not going to move forward with that. It's going to cost way more to do this. It's uncomfortable. It's actually inconvenient right now, but that's how important this is, right? That's now for us to kind of think about and address. Chair Mayeron was talking about research and how those effects can be a little more scalable is probably the best way to describe it. And you had a slide in here talking about how every part of mission does have a sustainability component. And I think that's completely accurate. Obviously, sustainability operations obviously have to start from here. You're not going to have any credibility, you know, going out and speaking on sustainability when we're not practicing it. So I understand why we start from there. But in that same vein, she was talking about research. I'm thinking of research as well, but then marrying that with outreach. You know, we have the royal we. I get to say we a lot for things I don't have. I was gonna say we have the knowledge. I don't, but we do. We have the research and we're doing amazing things. I imagine there's businesses, cities, communities that are on board, but don't even know where to start, don't even know how to go about making some of these changes, these creative systems, you know, that we're putting in place. Is there a way that, and I'm sure we're already doing this, but on the outreach and research front, kind of increase, you know, extension started focused on agriculture, obviously still is, but has evolved as people has, and that's in every county. You know, what if that was a business's starting point in whatever county, You know, where they could go and say, hey, we're thinking about that. We don't know, but we want to do something. And then that could assemble, and then we could assemble the right folks from across the system to help them. But I mean, that just goes back to that point of, okay, how do we amplify this? It's great on this campus. It's great on Morris. It's great on Duluth, Crookston, Rochester. But then how do we amplify that? You're talking about to the world, but certainly to the state is a good starting point. I think you can find a question in there, but lots of
Okay, well,
comments
I'm
as
going to
well.
interrupt you
Yeah, I'm
because
done.
we've got one more regent who would like to ask a question. I'm sorry, but then we have a number of items on our agenda that
was
I
it.
want to make sure we get to.
No, thank you, Chair.
So if you know what his question is, go ahead and answer it. Otherwise, I'll move on to Regent Gully.
You can move on. I'll try to integrate an answer to his question in
All right,
Regent
fair
Gully's.
enough.
2 for 1.
2 for 1.
Thank you, Chair,
Yep.
and thank you so much.
Bring us home.
I will try to add a question into what I wanted to say, which was honestly echoing what we've already heard from other regions, Region Kenyanya especially. But one of the things that surprised me when a year after the pandemic started was how little of a difference it made that people weren't driving anywhere in our climate change impacts. I've been fortunate to go and visit because I work in labor, so I have the opportunity to go and visit a lot of industry sites and have had the unfortunate realization that when they say, oh, most of our, we can't solve this with individuals. So much of the climate change impact is coming from industry. This is a place where I think we, as the University of Minnesota, are having an impact, but could continue to really grow in having an impact by working with the industries that are having the biggest impact on our climate here in Minnesota, and helping them to see ways to decrease their energy use and improve their energy efficiency and improve their climate impacts. So anyway, I guess there's not really a question in there, but I do want to say that I think that it's really important, and I appreciate your time on this presentation, and would be happy to have a follow-up conversation to talk about just opportunities that I see for this kind of work and partnership.
Chair Mayron, Regent Gully, and Regent Kenyanya, I'll answer this, both of them really quickly, to say that we have existing programs that address many of the things that you've highlighted as opportunities, and we are also working on strategies to how we grow both the reach of those programs and the impact that they have. So next time I'm here, I hope to have more to share with you at that point.
Thank you very much. A very important topic. Our next item on the agenda for this afternoon is to act on the amendment to the university's fiscal year 2025 supplemental budget request to the state of Minnesota. To take us through the changes since this item was presented for review at the December meeting, our interim President Ettinger and Senior Vice President Franz. Interim President Ettinger, if you would like to begin.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair Mayron. This item addresses an amendment to the supplemental fiscal year 2025 state budget request. It's based on the university's vision for an academic health system as presented to the governor's task force on academic health. The proposed amendment requests $80 million annually to improve healthcare by expanding and enhancing training opportunities to grow the pool of health professionals in Minnesota, improving equity and access to clinical care for underserved populations, and enhancing research to improve health outcomes. I would note that the allocation of the requested amounts to specific areas and programs may need to be adjusted depending on outcomes of negotiations with clinical partners and/or legislative action during the session. We do intend to keep the board updated as the session progresses. I'll now turn this over to Senior Vice President Myron Franz for details on the amendment.
Senior Vice President Franz.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Interim President Ettinger. It's good to be back on this topic. As Chair Mayron noted, we reviewed this in December, and we've had a few changes. Part of what I'd like to do today to get us on track for approval, for your request for approval, is to review a little bit about what's happened with the Governor's Task Force on Academic Health at the University of Minnesota and then to talk a little bit about the vision that we've been talking about at the university and give you some ideas about how I think we should go forward. So, since our last meeting in December, the governor's task force on academic health has issued its report to Governor Walz. We really want to thank Regent Wheeler, Dr. Tolar, and Dean Delaney, who served on the task force. We also want to thank the many people, the university leaders, including all of our health science program leaders who testified before the task force. They shared their expertise and their perspectives on workforce development and challenges for healthcare. But part of what Governor Walz, when he commissioned the task force, he really directed the task force to come up with ways to advance academic health at the University of Minnesota. And one of the things that the task force did was identified 3 problem areas that they thought deserved the most urgent attention. And I think it's important to review those here because they relate specifically to the requests that we're making in our supplemental budget request to the governor and to the legislature. The 3 questions are first, the current funding model for the University of Minnesota's academic health programs. The current funding is unsustainable, necessitating new funding approaches and shared goals, which is why you have a proposed request in front of you. Second, health professions training programs need to produce more providers to meet our future healthcare needs and to ensure equitable and accessible healthcare. And third, Minnesota's health ecosystem has untapped potential to develop innovative prevention and care models, and a comprehensive academic health system at the university is uniquely positioned to reverse that trend. We recognize the complexity of healthcare and the healthcare challenges that exist not only within our university system, but outside in the entire ecosystem of healthcare. The task force developed 20 different recommendations. In several recommendations, the task force emphasized the importance of strategic planning, financial support, infrastructure advancement, and workforce development to enhance the University of Minnesota's academic health system. The priority recommendations aim to address immediate needs while preparing for the future challenges of healthcare delivery and education. I think one of the overriding views that we heard at the healthcare task force that we need to make improvements today. We need to start this today, and we cannot afford to continue to put this off into the future. One of the rewarding aspects of presenting to the healthcare task force was their recognition of the university's 5-point plan that we identified last January in 2023. We have communicated our vision and our plan to build a true academic health system centered at the university. We believe this vision is essential for the future health and healthcare of the state of Minnesota. The university's vision presented to the task force in December specifically foresees a new hospital as part of the University of Minnesota Medical Center, or UMMC as we call it. The vision articulates urgency in planning now for that new facility and how best to integrate it into the UMMC owned and operated by the university. Mayo set the bar this year with the announcement of a new $5 billion investment on the Rochester campus. And last fall, the University of Iowa announced a $1 billion project to modernize and strengthen their medical centers and healthcare education programs. In their advising role to the task force, both Governor Dayton and Governor Pawlenty repeatedly underscored the urgent need for new investments to repair and improve existing facilities and to begin preparations to build a new state-of-the-art facility. This same sentiment was expressed by the Star Tribune editorial board when they called out the stiff competition that the University of Minnesota's medical center and healthcare programs face and urged us all to think big in advancing Minnesota's claim to leadership in health. The university's 5-point vision is focused on the public service that is core to the university's mission to the state of Minnesota. But caring for Minnesota's changing and aging population also relies on significant and sustained state investments, state-of-the-art facilities, and partnerships across the healthcare system. And that leads us today, and I'm not advancing my slides like I should. That leads us today to our supplemental budget request for $80 million annually to support academic health. The imperative of our request is underscored by the insights of the governor's task force, which illuminated the need for transformative action to safeguard the health and well-being of Minnesotans. This funding will be above and beyond what we currently receive from Fairview and will be used to address immediate needs in the healthcare sector and begin to plan for the next generation of Minnesota's expertise in health. Those items were discussed at length this morning in front of the Special Committee on Healthcare, and these items here list out those $80 million investments that we recommend that you approve going forward. One of the things that we also talked about were the outcomes that will be the result of this investment in spending. The next several slides deal with those outcomes, and I'm going to move through those fairly quickly and focus on the workforce development that we haven't talked a lot about. The rest of these, we've talked about the patient care experience at length, both in this committee, in front of the full board, and in front of the special committee, which is really critical for our to help improve and enhance access to great patient care for all Minnesotans. And the emphasis is on all Minnesotans. And then secondly, we've talked a lot about the research, the need for an academic health system to have support for not only for the research, but for the facilities to continue to attract and retain those talented researchers that help us stay on the forefront of new knowledge and new therapies that help save lives and improve lives in Minnesota. I'd like to spend a little time, though, talking about the workforce development because it's such a critical component, and the task force focused a lot on workforce development. One of the things that we realized is that the educational programs and partnerships at the university are really relied upon throughout the entire state. When you look at the medical school, the College of Pharmacy, the College of Veterinary Medicine, the School of Public Health, the School of Nursing, and the School of Dentistry, 70% of Minnesota's physicians and thousands of other healthcare professionals annually are trained by the University of Minnesota. World-renowned faculty work with students and patients to conduct groundbreaking research that inspires discovery and innovation, which is a catalyst for the state's future economic development and strength, let alone for the development of health and healthcare. In their report, the task force underscored the university's pivotal role as a contributor to the state's healthcare evolution, emphasizing the university's comprehensive health science programs and its position as an educator and trainer of most Minnesota healthcare workers. Our vision for academic health acknowledges that future developments must involve proper protections for worker rights, expanded opportunities, and job growth as the healthcare sector continues to expand and improve. Ensuring that protection of workers' rights and adherence to current labor contracts is of paramount importance to cultivate a culture of trust and respect among our dedicated healthcare professionals and guarantee the continuity of vital health services to the state of Minnesota. The bottom line is that this investment, we know that we can achieve an increase in access and availability of highly trained healthcare professionals, particularly in rural and underserved areas. We know that we can improve new and innovative workforce development programs to address emerging healthcare needs like mental health and addiction treatment. And we know that the expansion of educational pathways and partnerships to meet the evolving demands of the healthcare workforce will be addressed by the investment in this workforce development. This brings me to the close of the request for the approval by this board of the supplemental budget request. I just want to close by reiterating that this is one of three requests that we have before the legislature and the governor this year. The one that we approved last fall was a $45 million increase for our core mission of supporting our students, the talented faculty we have, and the staff who support them, and the $500 million to address urgent building maintenance needs that this board will see firsthand tomorrow, which will help improve the student experience, research competitiveness, and climate sustainability that we just heard about across all 5 campuses. These requests are bold but essential to sustain the excellence and the impact our institution has on communities across the state and worldwide, frankly. As we turn towards the legislative session, which starts on Monday, it's hard to believe, we will not hesitate with the universities to adhere to the university's funding priorities. Minnesota is now projected to have a budget surplus of $2.4 billion this biennium. And we will get an update on those numbers in a few weeks in the February forecast. This is a pivotal moment for the state, and we intend to closely collaborate with the legislature on what leaders have called a once-in-a-generation opportunity in healthcare. Our government relations and university relations teams will collaborate on a robust public relations and advocacy plan to build awareness and support for this ask. We have powerful stories to tell, and we intend to use all of our voices, including yours, to demonstrate the need for state investment and the outcomes we will achieve. With the state's partnership, we can expand our leadership in academic health, drive impactful research, and attract the very best talent, and ultimately educate our students to go on and participate in the state's workforce and economy in ways that they choose. This is an investment for the betterment of generations to come. This is the future of the University of Minnesota and its public service to the state of Minnesota. And I'm happy to take questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senior Vice President Franz. Before we turn to discussion, is there a motion to approve on behalf of the board the resolution related to the amendment to the supplemental fiscal year 2025 budget request to the state of Minnesota? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Now let's turn to discussion. Any discussion on the motion? Regent Turner.
I'm going to use the veterinarian health department as an example, because I think veterinarian pharmacy.
Regent Turner, make sure you've got your microphone, you're near your microphone.
Over here.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to use the veterinarian school as the example, because I think veterinarian, if I'm not, and pharmacy and dentistry, we're the only place you can learn those skills right here.
Exactly.
So my question is, this 80 million, and I had heard from that department that we can offer something like 120 spots a year to train. We have like 1,500 people that want to apply to it. We have a huge shortage, along with every other thing involving health, in veterinarian care. Okay, so can some of this go to be able to create more spots to be able to train more people, or is a problem that, just like with physicians, it's finding clinical sites for them, and how do we solve that problem?
Madam Chair, Regent Turner, I think one of the things that's challenging about increasing slots, whether it's in nursing school or the veterinary medicine school or the medical school, in the medical school, it's more tightly controlled by the amount of slots that are approved through the federal government. We have a little bit more leeway in the veterinary school, but I think part of the challenge also is when we think about expanding the number of graduates, we also have to think about the infrastructure that supports that. So part of what we believe is a critical component, and it's why we talk about the partnership with the state going forward, the university being a partner to the state, is thinking about this from a statewide global perspective and making sure that we are thinking about the entire health ecosystem, whether it's veterinary medicine or dentistry or nursing or medicine, to make sure that we start projecting what are those infrastructure costs to support those kinds of ideas, because you cannot just simply add seats to the school without sometimes adding infrastructure. So I think, I don't know the specific answer to your question. I think the key really is for us to come up with strategic plans so that all of our workforce development opportunities at the university, which are enormous and really fuel this state, are more thoughtfully planned to make sure that we put the right resources in all the right slots, and they all need some attention.
Yep, thank you. I think I was not really looking for your ultimate answer. I was just trying to point out a problem. If we can only graduate 120 at a time, we are never going to be able to fill the void.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or discussion before we vote on the motion? All right, there being no further discussion, it appears we are ready to vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. The motion is approved. Thank you very much. Senior Vice President Franz, I think you're going to come up here now. Is that correct? Gathering another notebook, all right. That brings us to the consent report. I'll talk slowly. Senior Vice President Franz will summarize the items in today's consent report.
Which report, Madam Chair?
This is the consent report.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I need my other notebook.
Okay, oh,
That consent okay. Can't help it.
What's one word? What's one word? Thank you. Sorry, Madam Chair.
that, no apologies needed.
So our today's consent agenda includes one request to use central reserves, 5 transactions for goods and services, 4 capital budget amendments, 3 schematic designs, 3 employment agreements, and 1 real estate transaction. First of all, I'd like to point out that we're seeking your approval to use up to $500,000 from the Central Reserves contingency funds to refurbish the Tribal Nations Plaza area outside of the Huntington Bank Stadium. Second, we have the 5 purchases of goods that I mentioned. I'd like to call your attention to one of them to make sure that you're aware that it's in the consent item. That is the contract extension that we talked about in December with Huron on the consulting contract for Peak. This is the contract extension. This contract would run through October 2024, and the additional details are outlined in your docket materials. And then the 4 capital budget amendments we have are really four major projects. It's the Advanced Operations Center project that will support our network and data services. We have the creation of the Hasselmo Hall Cryo Lab that will store the transmission electron microscope and other scientific instruments. We have the renovations to the law school courtrooms that were constructed over 40 years ago. And we have a new St. Paul Campus Center that will consolidate current space in the existing student center in the McGrath Library. The 3 employment contract agreements we have are Jordan Kofer, our new Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs and Dean at our Morris campus, Corey Heatherman, our new Defensive Coordinator for football on the Twin Cities campus, and the 3rd contract is an extension for Athletic Director Mark Coyle, which Interim President Edger will speak to in a moment. And the last thing we have is a real estate transaction for a 78-acre parcel of land in Carleton County that is a result of a generous donation to the University of Minnesota Foundation by Gregory Elstad as part of his estate. This gift will help advance the mission, research, and educational activities of the Department of Forest Resources. And that concludes my comments about the consent report.
Thank you very much, Senior Vice President Franz. As Senior Vice President Franz mentioned, the consent report includes an amendment to the employment agreement for Twin Cities Campus Athletic Director Mark Coyle. Before we proceed, I want to invite Interim President Ettinger to provide remarks on that item.
Thank you, Chair Mayron and Senior Vice President Franz. The accomplishments of our athletics department and student athletes during Mark Coyle's almost 8-year tenure has been truly exemplary. Athletic success in our hyper-competitive conference is important, and we do well there, as I'll touch on in a moment. But under Mark's leadership, we're equally dedicated to student athlete success in the classroom, and there we absolutely excel. Our Gopher student athletes just had another very strong showing according to the NCAA's latest graduation success rating data released in December. With a 95% graduation rate, Minnesota now has recorded the 6th highest GSR rates in school history over the last 6 years, including a school record 96% most recently. Last year, the department had 318 academic All-Big Ten honorees, 115 Big Ten distinguished scholars, 9 academic All-Americans, and a campus record 56 academic All-District selections. Across the varsity programs it sponsors, Gopher Athletics led the Big Ten in academic All-Americans and tied for 5th nationally. Gopher Sports finished 31st in the nation last year in the Learfield Directors Cup, which measures broad-based athletic success across sports. That's out of 305 athletic departments. This past year, the Gophers also won a pair of team conference championships in men's hockey and in women's hockey, and 7 individual Big Ten titles. Also, the challenges facing Athletic Director Coyle in this role have really expanded dramatically in recent years due to the ongoing national changes in intercollegiate athletics. This includes navigating issues of TV contract renewals, Big Ten expansion, the new world of name, image, and likeness considerations, and liberalized transfer portal rules. And Mark has been handling all these issues extraordinarily well. With this contract amendment, Athletic Director Mark Coyle will remain in the top third of the Big Ten rankings, grouped relatively closely with Nebraska and Illinois, whose athletic directors recently received new contracts. Given the exceptional performance he consistently demonstrates in the role, the total compensation of this amended contract for Athletic Director Mark Coyle is appropriate and in line with a rapidly changing athletic director market. Therefore, I recommend approval of this employment agreement amendment for Athletics Director Mark Coyle. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, before I invite a motion to approve the consent report, you are welcome to ask questions, make comments, or ask for any item to be separated out from the report to be voted on separately. Are there any questions, comments, or requests to separate out an item? Yes, Regent Farnsworth.
Thank you, Chair Mayron. I have one comment and one request for separation. The comment is about the Huron consulting contract, and I just want to very briefly summarize what I had said, I think the last time we talked about this, which is I appreciate the administration and folks working on this for bringing us in that discussion and since then more scope and perspective on evaluation and value to continuing these contracts. And so that's what made me not be supportive of the last extension, but I feel better about the last presentation on it, the information provided along, after some discussion and questions by, I don't think just myself, but speaking on behalf of myself. And so what the numbers is fairly high for that consulting and just reminding us to always think about value and how we approach that. I feel better about that now and I'm prepared to support it today. The request for separation is just the athletic director's contract because it's procedurally appropriate to do that when wanting to be in the record about something. So that's it, and just very brief comments about that.
All right. Any other questions or comments or requests for separation of an item? Regent Verhalen and then Regent Gully.
Thank you, Chair Mayron. And this is a question for SVP friends. I don't get to ask many more of you, so I'm going to take my opportunity. Just so I'm clear, and so we're all clear, right now we are with the Huron contracts, we are in the process of expending the $10 million gift from the foundation, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and if I got the math right, we received a $10 million gift from the foundation for purposes of advancing the Huron contracts. We've spent $3.8 million to date. Did I get that math right?
Madam Chair, I don't have that number right in front of me. First of all, thank you to the University of Minnesota Foundation for that $10 million. And is the answer yes, Vice President Tonneson?
I'm seeing a head nod.
She's coming up.
Purposes of the record.
Okay.
$10 million.
Sorry, Chair Mayron, Senior Vice President Franz, and Regent Verhalen. Yes, on Huron. We also spent an additional roughly $600,000 of it on other external contracts related to peak. So I just wanted to verify the 3.8 was the Huron portion.
Yep, and good. I am very happy that I did my math correctly. So thank you. But that does leave us. So then with this new extension, that'll put us at 6.4 million of the 10 million. And so we still have some of that gift left. And so from a fiscal responsibility standpoint as well, just getting those numbers in front of everyone so we understand kind of where we're sitting with that gift and the work that's been done.
Madam Chair,
yes.
We did exactly right. Yes.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Regent Gully.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, SVP. Could you give a quick explanation about why the athletic salaries are divided into base salary and supplemental, just for my edification?
Madam Chair, Regent, no.
Oh, need to call a friend?
I don't know. I've been here for 3.5 years and that's never come up before.
Okay.
Interim President Ettinger, could you explain that?
Well, I do know there are significant elements in those contracts that are performance-based, different types of accomplishments in the area, but we could give you more detail then as to how those are affected in any given area.
All right. Any other comments, questions? Yes, Regent Kenyanya.
Do you have to read it?
No.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is for the Senior Vice President. My question is about the Advanced Operations Center. Just curious, again, we've discussed this for years. It was part of the mix that I was have to change from East Gateway. But how did we arrive at the breakdown in terms of how much the foundation would contribute because of the relocation versus how much the university was funding for that project?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Regent Kenyanya, we sat down with extensive negotiations with the foundation and worked out one of the and I've got a friend here I can call the desk if necessary, but one of the goals was to make sure that the cost to move that facility was borne by the foundation in order for the mix to go forward. And of course, that's not a simple decision about how to do that. And so the foundation folks and our folks got together and worked through a number that we felt was fair to both sides.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments, questions, or desire to separate out items? All right, then at this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent report with, but not acting at this point on the part of the consent report that addresses Athletic Director Coyle's contract. We will address that separately. Is there a motion to approve the consent report without Mark Coyle's contract?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second. All right. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. Then at this time, I'd like to address the item that was separated, and that is the contract with respect to Mark Coyle. Is there a motion to approve that part of the consent agenda?
So
I will move it.
All right, is there a second? I heard a second. All right, we'll open it up for discussion at this point. Yes, Regent Farnsworth.
Thank you, Chair Mayron. I don't really have extensive comments, but this is the procedurally appropriate way to not support it, but be able to support the rest of the consent agenda. I wasn't able to vote for the last contract amendment 2 years ago in 2022. And for similar reasons, I was able to review the tape, and we had a long conversation about this, really involving, philosophy surrounding salary for these higher level contracts, looking at the intersection of markets and public institutions. And this is something that we've talked about as a board in many cases. And I perhaps have different views on this than most. And so, I want to be very clear, because sometimes this can get lost within a broader conversation around policy and governance, that my not being able to support this is really based on principle and policy, not personal to our current athletic director, who I think him and his family demonstrate exemplary dedication and service to the University of Minnesota. And so I'm going to continue to do whatever I can from this role to support and show up for our intercollegiate athletics enterprise. Many fantastic highlights, as such, Interim President Ettinger outlined in his earlier remarks. But I just, I'm not unable to support this today. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further, Regent Hipsch?
Thank you, Chair Mayron. I just, I'm not going to repeat everything that President Ettinger said about all the stats and everything, but one thing that he does bring to the table is respect. He's one of the most tenured athletic directors in the Big Ten. And there's not a single person I've ever talked to, and I talked to a lot of people, that don't think he's doing a great job. So he has that understanding of athletics, big picture stuff, and he's taken our athletic department to a whole new level. He really supports the student athlete. I don't think we could ask for anything more. It would be a huge hole to fill if we had to try to replace him. And so right now, with bringing in a new president and different things, this uncertainty of losing an athletic director is not something we need to go with right now. So I'm supporting the motion, and I'm hoping that the rest of you do too.
Thank you very much. Regent Gully.
Thank you, Chair. I want to both agree with what Regent Hubschat said and what Interim President Edinger has said, but also with what Regent Farnsworth has said. And I think it will probably not come as a huge surprise that this, I feel like the increase is too much, and not because of anything to do with our current athletic director, but because it sends a signal, because we're a public institution and we have people who get paid peanuts to do hard work every single day. And I feel like there needs to be some balance in that. So I won't support the motion, but I do want Athletic Director Coyle to know that that it's not personal, and that I think he's doing an incredible job as well. So
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the contract of Athletic Director Coyle, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Did you vote, Regent Gully?
yeah, I said no.
Oh, I didn't hear. All right, so the motion carries then. I don't know what the numbers are, but the motion carries. All right. Then at this time, we will turn to what I think may be the last item on the agenda, and that is the information items. Senior Vice President Franz, if you could address that or anything you want to highlight in particular.
Thank you, Chair Mayron. We have 4 items in the information item category. 3 of those are reports that are required by the state of Minnesota. There's a report on our biomedical science research facilities funding program. There's a report on our capital appropriations expenditure report, and a report on employment insurance aid. The 4th item is a copy of the recently issued credit rating report from Standard & Poor's. S&P affirmed its AA rating on the University of Minnesota's debt and considers our credit outlook to be stable. So we're very pleased to have received that, and that's in your materials. Thank you.
All right. Any discussion or questions on the information items? All right, thank you. Before we adjourn, I would like to note today that today is Senior Vice President Fran's last Finance and Operations Committee meeting as the senior leader liaison to this committee. The board will formally recognize Senior Vice President Franz at an upcoming meeting, but I wanted to express our deep appreciation for all you have done to support this committee and the university. You and your team have been outstanding partners in advancing the work of the committee and supporting the university's mission. Thank you for your exemplary service to the committee, to the university, and our state, and I think this man deserves a round of applause. Yep.
Out of control.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
And with that, this meeting is adjourned. See you all tomorrow.